Well, good morning to everyone out there, and welcome to the Polk County School Board's work session on this fine, beautiful Florida day. Seeing a lot of smiling faces out there, new faces as well. We will now call the work session for November 19th, 2024 to order. Again, I would like to thank everyone for being here today, especially our staff, who are available and accessible to help and address any questions that we're going to have for you. We're humbled to serve alongside the most highly educated workforce and dedicated workforce in the United States. I would like to start by reading our Who Are We statement. And it goes like this. We are the Polk County Leadership and Governance Team. If we were to pick one phrase to define us, it would be student-centered, because when we come together to work, we lean on our diverse backgrounds and experiences to ensure that our decisions are focused on providing a high-quality education for all students. The four most important things to our governance team are: 1, operating with integrity; 2, respecting our students, our staff, families, and each other; 3, establishing a culture where stakeholders feel valued, supported, and have opportunities for personal and professional growth; and then lastly, supporting an approach of continuous improvement, that growth mindset, to ensure student outcomes. Collectively, we need to work on behalf of the children that we serve and then find these avenues of agreement so that we can govern the district in an effective manner. There's really no acceptable alternative to that. We will always collaborate in a respectful manner in order to enhance opportunities for each student and staff members. We will not disparage others. Our students will thrive because we will remain committed to supporting the whole child. So we hope to engage and empower our students and stakeholders to create a community of lifelong learners. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Superintendent Hyde to lead us in our work session today.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, board members, members of community and staff. Pleasure to be here with you today. Our first item, I have the distinct pleasure of bringing up Ms. Christina Kreiser Jackson, our President and CEO for United Way of Central Florida, who's here to join us and provide a short presentation. Emphasis on short. No, I'm just kidding. You got. Oh, I'm sorry. And she's joined by Rod Crowley as well, Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you. This on? Okay. So first of all, I was asked to provide kind of an update on our hurricane response this year. As we all know, it's been a tough year. One of the things that United Way of Central Florida does is we oversee the 8-state footprint for Publix, being with the corporate headquarters here, and we're the lead processor for Publix, which is the #1 global corporate leader for United Way worldwide. We kind of help oversee that, and as we know, a lot of that 8-state footprint was damaged severely by Hurricane Helene. We helped manage over 700 employee cases for their associates. One of the things that typically happens when a hurricane hits is usually or a storm or a tornado or whatever happens to be, we usually work with about 4 to 6 United Ways to help manage that process and help those employees. In the case of Hurricane Helene, we work with 29 local United Ways because of the large path. Some of the other things we did during that time was we worked with Freedom Tour here in Eloise to broker semi-loads of water to East Tennessee right after Helene hit. There was a severe need for water up there. We took it to a couple different airports where they actually airlifted a lot of that water into some people that could not get out of their area that they were in. We also worked to put together 2,500 hygiene kits and food boxes that went up to 4 different states that Publix serves at. And then a few weeks later, or less than a few weeks later, we had Hurricane Milton hit our specific location, our specific area. Almost like we had a crystal ball, we were working with Polk Emergency Management earlier this summer to put together a possible pilot program in the event that we had a direct hit from a severe hurricane. In that tabletop exercise that we did in early August, we had a mock Hurricane Coleman Category 3 go right over the top of Polk County, so that's kind of what we were planning for months before this hit. What the plan was to bring resources in as soon as our area was imminent of a direct hit, and also that we were declared a state of emergency would be to order those resources from the state. The county typically doesn't set up their points of distribution until after the storm, when they know the impact and what part of the county was hit. So what our plan was to bring those resources into One More Child in Lakeland and Freedom Tour in Eloise, and stage and store those resources. So as everything worked out, it was a masterful plan. One of the things that happened ahead of the storm, Superintendent Hyde, at the projection that maybe 40,000 people were going to come to the shelters here, realized that, you know, we didn't have enough water on hand and some things. So as a result of that, we were able to immediately, before the storm or as the storm hit, get 4 semi-loads of resources to the school district to potentially man those, which wasn't needed. But those resources were able to go elsewhere then. As a result of that plan, in the 11 days after the storm, we did 137 extra food and water distributions that were not planned. Some of those were 100% storm related. Some were just because of the economy and the needs out there of people. We got out over 55,000 cases of water, 24,000 cases of MREs, equivalent of 2.1 million meals, and 5,000 tarps. We also enacted the United Community Relief Fund with GiveWell Community Foundation, which has distributed so far $80,000 to 11 different nonprofits, and we're looking at a round 2 for that. Also, the FFA chapters in Polk County did a donation drive for us, which we've gotten those goods out in the community, as well as the athletics departments. And then we've been working to put together some community connection meetings. We held one on Comby Road on October 30th. And we had FEMA there. We had a number of community resources there as well. We had over 450 people show up to that. We had comfort stations there, so showers, laundry type things as well. The FEMA representative that was with us told us they could go knocking on doors all day long and maybe get a dozen or 8 to 10 people that sign up and get their applications completed. They did over 200 that day at that event. So we have another one of those planned this Saturday at RP Funding Center from 10 to 5 on Saturday, and we're bringing in a bunch of resources. We're going to have FEMA there and a number of other organizations to help us as well. So that's just kind of a small part of everything, but we've been very busy, and I think we've made some great, amazing impact over the last few weeks.
Thank you, Rod. Dr. Crowley? We also, during this last period of time, the last couple of weeks, we've had an opportunity to see the need and see a new perspective of the need in the community. We've also seen philanthropic efforts and philanthropy expose itself in new and amazing ways. One being the opportunity to host a food drop in North Lakeland, and just one quick call to Superintendent Hyde, and he had the school located and secured. And then we had a church that came out with volunteers within an hour. And so that we are breaking some records with the volunteerism and the efforts to get that on the community. But also the realization of how drastic the need is in our local community. And I know you all see that on a regular basis, but the need of support for our partners and our nonprofits. And our nonprofits are core to the work that we do. So we created a folder for you that will recap the hurricane response that was just discussed and described by Dr. Crowley. But we also have a brochure in here that speaks to the work that we do on a regular basis on clear skies, blue skies, and the amazing impact that our partner agencies are making. A large part of that is in collaboration with Polk County Public Schools. And so we're very grateful for this partnership and the support that you all provide. In addition to our 69 agencies that are embedded throughout the community and include Boys and Girls Club, Girls Inc., AFI, VISTI, and others, we also have our Reading Pals program. And over 200 volunteers are in the Polk County Public Schools at over 15 schools, providing an hour of mentorship. And what's really unique and special about this partnership with Reading Pals is that these children aren't already identified as having development delays, but the teacher has noticed and identified that there's some sort of external factor or something in this child's life that could prevent them from learning and developing at the level of their peers. I have 4 minutes. We also have our End Hunger service. Rod mentioned the food drops, which was a much needed need in the community in the last couple of weeks. We say whenever people are eager and excited to see MREs, there is a need, and there was a need. But on a regular basis, we do provide healthy foods, fresh meats, vegetables at our food drops. And we are proud that one of those food drops is at one of our Polk County Public Schools, but in partnership with many of the schools. And then we also have our 211 resources. And at any time, when community members are reaching out to you and expressing that they need help or assistance, they can use that number. It's 211, or they can text their zip code to 898-211. So we're very grateful for this opportunity to talk about our partnership, but we also want to say thank you. Right now, we're in the middle of our Polk County Public Schools fundraiser workplace campaign. The Polk County Public Schools team, staff, teachers, administrators are one of our top supporters for Polk, Highlands, and Hardee counties, and we're very grateful for the support. In the midst of all this hurricane response, we had the pleasure of going over to Lake Gibson High School, and if you haven't gone to their haunted house or their pumpkin, Rise of the Great Pumpkin. It's absolutely amazing. It was students, it was teachers, it was principals getting in the dunk tank, and they were all along the track and raising funds for United Way for the local community. And the community was coming out in just carloads. So it's just so exciting to see that not only are our teachers, our administrators of Polk County Public Schools supporting as leadership givers and donors, but they're also pitching in and encouraging students. We're raising charitable children and raising charitable students that really care about their neighborhood and about where they live. So I hope you all will join us in this year's campaign. I know a couple of you have already made a financial donation, but again, we're grateful for your support and your leadership. Any questions?
I'm waiting. Ms. Fields?
So I don't have any questions. I want to thank United Way of Central Florida for being an amazing partner in our community and our school district. And at the last few meetings, I have challenged every board member to be a giver to United Way. And it's easy to do, payroll deductions every month. And so I'm challenging you all to do that because we never know when we might need the service. The hurricanes are a great example of that. And we can't expect for our employees to give and we not give. So I'm challenging you all to do that for the benefit of our students, our families, and our community. I can't say enough about United Way. They hold us accountable for every dollar that we get from them. And I know that firsthand from Girls Inc. of Lakeland. So I want to just commend United Way for being proactive and not reactive, and for every opportunity that you all have to sow a seed back into the community, you all do that. And you find ways to do things that others could not do. And I want you all to know the impact that you all have in our community, in our county, in our state, in our nation is second to none. And I am very proud to be a part of the United Way of Central Florida. Thank you.
Mr. Sharpless?
I don't have a question either. I just want to echo the words of Board Member Fields. Thank you for what you do. It's invaluable, truly, especially after things like our hurricane, but it's everyday needs that you also so generously just serve. I mean, it's servant leadership at its best. And I'll say that. I also like to say this is the second year in a row that I have accepted Board Member Fields' challenge. So it started last year when you challenged us. It's like you said, you never know, right? You never know. And so it's always about giving back. And so thank you for what you do. And I encourage all of our staff members, my fellow board members, to also contribute. That's all.
So I'll take the last word then. So I have the benefit of sitting on your board, and I will tell you that I get additional insight that many others don't to the level of commitment. You and I talk frequently. Dr. Crowley, congratulations. That's recent for you. I want to recognize you. We speak frequently, especially when we have a need, or there are other issues pressing in our community, and I just want to continue to echo, the level of commitment and the passion that you bring to this role is really, it's truly impressive. You don't see that everywhere. There are a lot of non-for-profits that work hard, but you don't just work hard. You focus on working at the right things at the right time for the right people, for the right reasons. And for that, I want to say thank you and recognize you publicly for all that both of you do and your entire dedicated team. So it's a pleasure to serve with you. Thank you. There are no further questions or comments. Appreciate it. The next two items, board members, will be co-presented by Ms. Linda King. As you know, Ms. Linda King is the Senior Director for Risk Management and Employee Benefits. The first item that we'll be addressing in the workshop is the Prescription Assistance Program, and she'll be joined by Jeff Post, Chief Clinical Officer for RX Connection.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde. And board members, thank you. Dr. Allen, welcome, Mr. Keys. Pleasure to have you on the board. And yes, today we wanted to introduce to you the Prescription Assistance Program that we are proposing to add January 1st. And Mr. Post is here to answer questions about that and talk to you more about it in general. But basically, it's a concierge program that we're looking to add that deals with specialty medications. And this has gone before, it was actually introduced as a part of the RFP that was solicited and presented before the Health Strategy Committee. And they unanimously recommended that. And then we brought forward a recommendation specifically once we chose a pharmacy benefit manager, and that was Welldyne here in Lakeland. That was recommended. And then we looked at several pharmacy prescription assistance program vendors. And once we chose the PBM, and RxValet was the one that got the most amount of support. So, Mr. Post, I believe you were going to talk about that specifically. So, I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, for the essence of time, I just obviously appreciate your time today, and pharmacy benefits costs are the number one driver in healthcare today, and so as plan sponsors and payer, we're all struggling with how do we find ways to offset some of the most expensive medications and the cost of these medications. And as you think about the cascading events, there's certain prices you have to pay for them. Utilization management is how we manage the risk of them, right, the exposure. But after that, you're then basically on the hook for the cost of those medications for your members. Coupon optimization is a program you already have in place today, and it's simply using pharmaceutical coupons to help offset for your members and to help offset for the school system with the cost. And then the two programs we unpacked were international sourcing and alternate funding. Alternate funding is what she was referring to as the patient assistance program. That's where we're looking for additional assistance from the manufacturer. And I want to kind of give you a few key statistics on that. So manufacturer assistance programs are where you're basically matching the member with the optimal amount of funding available from the pharmaceutical manufacturer, right? These medications typically are $5,000 to $6,000 in cost, and everybody knows that typically there's a pharmaceutical coupon available, not meant to cover more than about 10 to 15% of the cost. But that individual member may qualify for additional funding. So the way patient assistance programs work are they're basically matching the patient with maximum assistance. So that concierge advocacy service is, I have this member that needs this very expensive medication. They match them to the optimal amount of assistance available. So it's a matching process that members on these medications have to go through once a year. International sourcing, on the other hand, I know the governor for the state of Florida has done a great job with kind of opening the door to this conversation, but international sourcing is where a member can opt into a program and actually purchase the medication through an international source at a significantly lower cost, typically about 70% lower cost than U.S. U.S. costs include rebates and a lot of games, and so there's a much lower international pricing for it. So we looked at both of these exhaustively throughout the health plan strategy meetings and after the selection of Welldyne as your PBM. And again, the savings was pretty significant from an overall opportunity perspective. Again, we're talking about potentially a couple of $1 million in savings based off of roughly 200 to 225 members on these very expensive medications. So at that point, we knew that it made sense that our members could go on that journey with us of having a once-a-year financial case review, but now the question was going to be around the vendor selection process. And so as we looked at all of the various vendors, we knew that by picking Welldyne, they kind of gave us the greatest opportunity, both from flexibility standpoint, and then that bottom green box is just to let you know that international can be put into your workflow if you choose. And so really they kind of gave us an open platform where you now can choose your vendor. and choose your programs. And so we went on this journey to evaluate. Welldyne had an internal solution. Paid Health, Script Sourcing, and RX Valet are all considered point solutions or standalone solutions. So we're now thinking about, obviously, the service, the cost, the member experience, the potential savings, right? There's a lot of variables that go into the decision-making process. And I highlighted in green kind of where RX Valet stood out in the process. All of these services work under a shared savings fee structure. You save money, the fee structure is based off of the savings for Polk County. And RX Valet had the significantly lower shared savings fee structure of 10 versus the 25, which is pretty much the benchmark across the industry. The capitation also is very attractive, I think, for the school district to hear. This is the capitation on what the price could be for one of those really expensive outlier claimant. Most of them align with stop loss limits, which is $100,000. Theirs, because it's $1,500 per month, the capitation would be $18,000 per year. So they're coming in at a lower fixed fee, lower capitation, and that really drills down to higher achieved savings for the school district. So that was one of the financial reasons for bringing them as a vendor. The other part is the fact that from an international standpoint, they have an international offering also built into the program. Welldyne had an international program only on specialty medications. And then as you moved over, Paid Health had no other alternative international program. Script Sourcing and RX Valet had a more comprehensive one. But again, in green, the fee structure was a cost-plus basis. So I attune it to Mark Cuban's cost-plus, right? It's the cost of the medication plus a clearly defined dispensing cost, and there's no other shared savings, no other incentive fee structures for it. And it's a very broad list of medications. And so again, as you kind of pull it down to the bottom, it ends up with a higher net savings, mainly due to the lower fee burden. Again, thinking of how we could put in a program. The last checking point was operations, right? Are there going to be any operational issues or concerns with member experience between the different programs? Because we're already changing PBMs and we were very concerned about member experience and member abrasion. The idea that RX Valet has all of those programs built within their playbook gave us the opportunity to really have a strong member experience from that concierge approach, where we can basically be ensured that the member is going to understand the program, and also if there is an international offering opportunity, that exact same service. There's not going to be a handoff to another service, right? We're not layering in multiple vendors. And so again, they could quarterback basically this high-cost claims management process through a single vendor relationship. So from a kind of checkbox standpoint, I felt like they delivered the smoothest possible member experience operationally. And then also from a pricing standpoint, they had the lowest fee structure. And from a member experience, patient advocacy, we have other groups with them, and the member experience is one that's exceptional, just like the word valet that they put in their name is a part of. They really build that in from their culture top down. I'm going to pause there because there's more on RX Valet, but I wanted to just see if there's any questions. It's a lot to take in.
So I don't have any questions, but I serve on the Health Strategy Committee, and I want to thank the committee for the hard work. They have really been serious about the charge that the superintendent gave the committee, which is basically we need to lower the cost of our health expenses for our employees, yet keep it at a high level as it relates to quality. And I think that the strategy committee has done that. And one of the things that made RX Valets appear to me to be a good fit was Welldyne was very complimentary of them, and they already have a good relationship working with them. And in addition to that, the decrease in costs that they're able to help us with. And I think that was the main factor for me. And I think that it has been, not I think, but I know that it's been vetted. And I think that the quality is going to be there for our employees. And I think that this is a good fit for us. But the bottom line is that there will be a tremendous savings in costs. And we're definitely about doing that, yet keeping the quality of services to our employees at a high level.
And just to clarify, our recommendation that we brought to the Health Strategy Committee was let's focus all of our attention on those highest cost claimants come January. A lot of change going on with vendor changing on both medical and pharmacy. And so our recommendation was RX Valet for the patient assistance program. For those that have international opportunities, only again on those very high cost specialty medications, again, concentrating on those 200 most expensive utilizers, we would also offer that as an opportunity. International is something we can roll out to traditional medications, and so we talked about the opportunity to offer it to, again, blood thinners, diabetes. There's other medications that we can offer the program to where it's free to the member, but we recognize that's a lot of change happening in January, and so we're holding that off until there's the rollout and education session for the members. So we're hoping for a smooth January start, but know that we have some additional savings opportunities that will enhance potentially the member experience and then also enhance the member out of pocket. When they opt in, their copay always drops to zero, and we're hoping to bring that out later in the year also in a broader, once we get through that January transition.
Dr. Allen?
Thank you, Superintendent. Yeah, I was just curious what the tactics look like in regards to targeting, I think you said about 225 members in particular, but then what that broader piece to really help our employees understand
Yeah,
the transition.
Yeah, so fortunately, most that are on a specialty medication, those roughly 200, they kind of know they're special because they're already getting it through a specialty pharmacy in your benefit design today. And so they really know who they are. But the communication for this program is going to be very targeted to them specifically. So the goal is bring them into the fold, give them very targeted communication, and give them the opportunity to understand the program, ask questions, and even connect with the program prior to January 1st so that they can answer the additional questions. As we think about the traditional rollout, as members qualify, they too can receive a letter to opt into the program. If you think about the word international, it's member choice, right? At no point will your member be told you have to procure it internationally because it'll save the plan money. This is us coaching the member on the savings opportunity and asking them to go on the journey with us.
Okay, I see no further questions or comments. Next item, board members. Again, Ms. King, and she will be discussing the contract with Lantern Specialty Care, formerly known as Surgery Plus. And she is being joined by Kelly Palmer, Vice President of Sales for Lantern.
Okay, another enhancement, actually, this is an enhancement to our program, but it also is going to be a savings as well, is introducing, this is known as Surgery Plus. You may have heard from some of the other school districts surrounding us with the state of Florida's benefits. And Surgery Plus, as it was known and now known as Lantern, is actually a referral program for voluntary surgery, opt-in elective surgery, so to speak, knee replacements, shoulder surgeries, things of that nature. And what it's doing is actually through a referral process to centers of excellence. They're using highly qualified doctors and surgeries to make sure, number one, the employee qualifies for the surgery. How many times have employees had surgeries recommended that really maybe wasn't quite time to have the surgery done? Number one, that can result in a savings to the health plan. Number two, can sometimes do more damage by doing it too early versus waiting, and can save the plan money. But secondly, also, there can be also some additional benefits that come actually by using this program. Number one, the co-payment would be waived for the employee. How great a benefit, right? The employee won't pay that 20% share, okay, or co-payment for the surgical procedure. Also, for somebody like me that's single, if you need someone to come stay with you, there could be, I've got to have people normally from out of town. There's going to be costs associated with travel. There's per diem paid for that person to come travel, to stay with me. That's a great benefit. It may incentivize someone to maybe come help me, and certainly help with the burden of that expense. So what I'm going to do now, and also we're tagging along with the state of Florida's guarantee, so we're going to get a 2-to-1 return on investment with the savings through this. And Lantern actually takes a percentage of savings off they retain a percent of savings off the cost of the surgery. So Kelly, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
She did so great. Thank you so much, Kelly Palmer. I'm from Dallas, Texas. That's where our corporate headquarters is located. I serve a lot of our clients in Florida, multiple school systems, counties, state of Florida, so really appreciate your time today. Want to touch on the member experience for using Lantern Care, talk about quality, talk about our network access, what it looks like, where we're going to send your members, and then the financial savings. I'll skip through some of these just for the sake of time to give a little background on why did we change our name. We were Surgery Plus for many years, but we did some research and we said, you know, the member is at the heart of everything that we're doing. Healthcare is confusing. Health insurance is confusing. We're in open enrollment myself right now, and some of it doesn't make sense. So having kind of that guiding light to help members every step of the way. This is an example of some of the clients that we work with. I will point out, because of the growth that we've had over the last few years, we're now serving 6 million members all across the United States. We've got partnerships with Meritain, for example, so behind the scenes, seamless integration, file feeds, sharing eligibility, Quantum Health. Again, seamless integration. If members are calling in, asking about who do I go to for a shoulder surgery or a knee scope, great, you've got Lantern Care, let me transfer you. Having that continuum of care for members, and then also partners such as 2nd.MD, Embold Health, Sword and Hinge, those are some virtual physical therapy that we offer. I mentioned the care advocate, or the member experience, really is at the heart of what we're doing. I'm the daughter of a school superintendent, right? So I know all the pressures that my dad had on his shoulders and how important it was for his administration and his educators to really have good benefits, right? And so we want that experience to be absolutely premium. It is a concierge model. So while we know we all like our apps and our member portal and all the tech stuff, at the end of the day, surgery is confusing. It can be emotional, it can be a little scary. You pick up the phone, you've got someone that you can talk to. It's a one-on-one. Those are our employees, so we're not outsourcing this role. They're available just about 16 hours a day, multilingual, so we're able to handle any language that comes in. But when a member calls in, we're first educating them about the benefit. They don't have to use Lantern Care. They've got a great program, Carrier Network, but if they want to, we're an option for them. Think of it as like an enhancement. We're going to hold their hand. We're going to, depending on the type of surgery that they need, where they're located, their care advocate will provide different options. It's the member's choice. They can read their bios, they can look at their background. If they don't like any of those doctors, we get feedback. We send them 3 more. So we work with the member throughout that process. If they want us to schedule their shoulder surgery, we're happy to do that. We make sure that we transfer medical records from their primary care physician to the attending surgeon. And then also when that surgery is over, we transfer it back. We want that information to be with the member. So our role is really to provide that premium experience. Quality is really at the forefront too. So when we think about where we're sending your members, we have our own proprietary network. So we've put together bundles that include the surgeon, the anesthesia, and the facility. But we start at the surgeon level first when we're looking at this criteria. Here is our clinical board. Love to point out a couple, I can kind of be a fan with some of these if you're a healthcare nerd. Jason Tibbles joined our team. He came from Teladoc. He also sits on the Texas Medical Advisory Board. In addition to all of his leadership, he still practices in the clinic 2 days a week. Raymond Huang came to us from Hinge Health. He oversees all of our clinical metrics. Jennifer Cook is one of our co-chairs. She's up in the Tampa area, one of the top female orthopedic surgeons in the nation. We also have Alan Davis. He came to us from Cleveland Clinic. And then we've got Troy Brenham, who was the previous CVS Health and Aetna Health Chief Medical Officer. So really strong backgrounds Our medical advisory board also consists of an expert in every category that we cover. So when we think about surgeon level quality first, right? It's not the building that's doing the surgery, it's the doctor. And so we make sure all of our bundles are with that particular surgeon. We look at board certification, fellowship trained. We do state sanctions in all 50 states. We're looking at that doctor's background, reputational review, malpractice review. We've got to do our due diligence to see what is in that background, if there has been any lawsuits. After we have our initial review, about 25% of the time, the doctor will make it to stage 2. That's in-person interviews. We're looking at ERAS protocol, which is enhanced recovery after surgery. What are they? Opioid reduction. Are they avoiding opioids at all costs? When we think about that facility, we're looking at key surgical metrics, leapfrog data, CMS data, as well as HCAP scores. As Linda mentioned, sometimes the best option is no surgery at all, and we love that. If we are sending a member, maybe they've been told they needed a knee replacement, right, from a previous doctor, but we're sending them to a fellowships-trained lower extremities specialist that only does knees and knees revisions. He says, no, you're not ready for a surgery. Let's do physical therapy. Let's do some cortisone injections, maybe some diet changes. That's a great outcome for us if we can avoid the potential for putting that member under. Our quality focus results in a complication rate across all of our surgeries of less than 1%. So when you think about the risk of a complication, it can increase the price of that surgery 300-400%. So we have to stay focused on quality. This shows our network all across the United States. Also pointing out if it is a true, well-known centers of excellence that we need to send a member to, it's in our network. We have Johns Hopkins, we have Cleveland Clinic, Boston Children's. So we've got those. We also have community hospitals and ambulatory surgical centers. Non-emergent procedures. So it's not just MSK, it's not just hips and joints and spine, it's anything that you can plan in advance. It's women's care, it's ENT, it's ear tubes, even for pediatrics. So if it's a procedure that you can plan in advance, we most likely cover it. So all of these make up about 20% of your healthcare cost. But what's great is we're not disrupting very many members. Very few members will need one of these type of surgeries. So when we think about your member population, we've done a heat map. You can see right there in red, Polk County, and then all of the little green indicators are our providers. I have provided an average distance, depending on where they're located. So maybe we're asking them to drive 39 miles on average. If they live outside of the county, it could be a lot closer. So knowing that it is a little bit of a disruption for members, we do things like a fuel allowance. We send them a gift card with a small amount of money to handle fuel. If they have a caregiver with them, there's a per diem that they get as well as the caregiver gets. Not all, but some of the facilities, I've provided some example on the right-hand side. These are just some of the ones that we would be sending your members to give you an idea of who is in our network. Again, we start at the surgeon first, so it's where the surgeon is providing that care. Want to give an example of our public sector impact. So as this was done through August when we presented to the Health Strategy Committee, we have about 526,000 members in Florida enrolled into our program for this year. We've completed about 1,600 procedures, about 29 million in savings. I've listed our schools at the bottom. These are the schools that currently have us in place. Above that, we've got some state of Florida, some different cities and counties as well. I'll highlight a couple case studies and then wrap it up for questions. Pasco County Schools has been with us since January 23. Really strong engagement. Not only do we have Pasco County Schools, we have Pasco County, and we have Pasco County Sheriff, all that have Lantern in place. So far this year, when we ran this, we've saved them $4.9 million. We've done 266 surgeries. They've got about 9,000 employees enrolled into the medical plan. So really significant savings. Brevard School, it's a little bit smaller, 2.2 million is our savings that we provided. They've been with us since June of 21. We also serve the county as well. And then the last one is Orange County. Just wanted to highlight about 2.3 million in savings this year. Now, all of these have put us in place as completely optional. So the member has choice. If they want to use us, they can. There's no obligation. We're simply an enhancement. The savings vary conservatively. In fact, I would truly, based on our book of business, expect stronger results. But year one, about $600,000 net savings. Year two, we usually see it double. So that first year, that's our, we're building awareness, we're educating members. Year two, that usually doubles, so about 1.3 million. 2.1 in the third year, they're 3-year contracts. We would anticipate about $4 million net savings. Our fee model is a percentage of savings. So there's no cost to put us in place. There's no charge for marketing, communications. We are there to be an extension of your team to help build awareness, educate members, and truly provide that level of service. Questions?
Ms. Fields?
I don't have any questions, but I was wondering if Ms. King could kind of tell us about how we're going to be marketing all of these changes, because that was one of the concerns that the Health Strategy Committee had, is making sure that the staff know what these changes look like and make sure that we're in front of the changes. And
Yeah, one of the ways we'll be doing that, we're working on actually videos that we're actually going to be promoting. And we're actually working on the scripts for those right now. And actually, the specialty medication video, we're going to actually carve out as a separate little piece, just because we're trying to keep it, we already met with public relations, we're trying to keep it pretty small, 3 to 5 minutes, the top 5 or 6 things that we want to talk about. And we're going to put Lantern in there as well. But we're trying to keep it pretty small, just focusing on those things that are enhancements and things they need to focus on as far as changes. So,
what are we doing beyond the videos?
We're actually going to be rolling them out probably around the first of the year. And I know I'd asked Human Resources for some time during the in-service time. I haven't gotten an answer from Mr. Warren, but I know he's looking at that. So,
I know one of the things Superintendent Hyde that we talked about was the value of making sure that we have whatever we can on the website so that our staff can go directly to that for the resources that they need, but just making sure that they are comfortable and know exactly what all the changes will look like.
yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am. And so there will be, and Ms. King outlined for me, and I believe I shared that with Ms. Wyatt and a few others that inquired the same thing. There is a strategy in place. It utilizes videos for a video library that staff can always go refer back to, but also site visits, different types of meetings, communication, direct communication, either through email, are all part of that package to make sure that we're getting our employees a summary of, and it needs to be concise enough, like there'll be, essentially what we hope to have is 2 options, right? As Ms. King was pointing out, the videos can't be more than 3 to 5 minutes because then you lose your audience. The same thing's true in our written communication.
Going to be a huge proponent for us too, also helping with that one-on-one questions, where they're going to be a huge promoter for us as far as their website and helping navigate everything about any kind of a benefit. And it can be anything from retirement to leave of absence. It can be health-related, non-health related, and that's going to be mentioned also, very much so, and highlighted in the video as well, because that's a huge change for our employees.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. I'm still struggling to understand why we waited until after open enrollment to share all of this. And it sounds like things are changing next year, even though we said that they weren't changing. So one question that we commonly get is programs like this are perceived to slow down being able to get the care that you need, as well-intentioned as they are. How do we avoid it slowing down people getting the care that they need?
I know one thing I wanted to make sure you understood with the prescription assistance program, and one thing that we failed to mention, I guess, was while that assistance is being sought, the school board's still going to fill the script. So there's going to be no delay in the employee getting their specialty medication. So I wanted to make sure you understood that. So there'll be no delay in them getting their medication. So we'll make sure all of that's taken care of immediately for them. So there won't be any delay in medication. As far as the surgical approval and all that, Kelly can speak to that. So.
Absolutely. We've got great relationships. It's a one-on-one. They've got a concierge that's making those appointments or assisting them. So many cases, we've got expedited preferential treatment, so to speak. So like me as a consumer to call and try to get an appointment, it might be 3-6 months down the road. Like our providers are able to get members in a matter of weeks. So that's a huge proponent of having that level of service.
Thank you. And so how are we bridging the gap from, it's the middle of November, I have a surgery coming up, but the first day that they can schedule me is January 20th, but now this is part of our new plan. How are we bridging that gap? Are we going to have people that get there and then realize that they didn't get the pre-approval that they need and now they're being sent home after fasting for 24 hours?
Love the opportunity to build awareness. Like this is, majority of surgeries will happen in Q4. We can go live at any point. That's kind of the benefit of our program. Now, if we can communicate or build awareness, or if there are instances that, we can just say, hey, this is coming down the pipeline in January 1. We're also there's a certain level of service we can provide to members in advance without truly carrying that case out. So, as we're having these conversations and able to get things moving, we can serve those members and talk about the program and help get them to a position where it's expedited come January 1.
So if there are schedules that are currently scheduled for after January 1, are those going to be impacted by this relationship?
Yes, I mean, we're an option. They don't have to use us.
Okay.
So
That was-
it's just like, hey, here's a great offering. You don't have to pay anything for the surgery.
it.
For the school, you're going to save about 50% on every single procedure. That's the volume of the savings that we're going to provide.
Okay. But they could schedule through the process that we've always used, and there won't be.
Correct, absolutely, absolutely. And we find a lot of planned things. Again, these are more planned surgeries. And again, I'm thinking selfishly like employees. We find most of those things tend to happen during breaks, right? So we're thinking spring break, we're thinking summer breaks. Those things tend to happen months in advance, but we are going to have Quantum open beginning December 1st. They've already been in conversation. We already knew we were rolling this out. We anticipated approval, so we've already had conversations in advance. So we've already kind of been planning in the background for this. And knowing Quantum is going to be up and running December 1st to start taking calls from members. So they're already going to know in the background that this is going to be available for members. So if they call in with questions and transition issues, this is already going to be starting to have a conversation towards that benefit for them. So.
And then my last question is, can we get a one-pager that has all of these new programs outlined on it, what each one supports, who do you call when?
Absolutely.
Because I can already foresee that we're going to start getting those questions as soon as it rolls out. I don't know, just from talking to community members and that work for us, I would be shocked if there are more than 100 people that are currently employed with us that know that this is coming down the pipe, because I don't think that we have communicated it broadly. But having a one-pager that when we do start to get calls, because they're coming, that
Absolutely.
we can
Happy to do that for you. Thank
share
you.
would be helpful. Thank you.
Ms. Fields?
We talked about an FAQ that would be available as well. I don't know about whether or not there's a lack of communication as it relates to overall school district. Do you have any feel on that? Superintendent Hyde, do you have any feel on that?
No, ma'am, I'm aware of it, not just simply because I'm in my seat, but I've gotten emails about the changes. And so, but I respect the fact that others have shared with me, they didn't see it, it went to their spam folder, those types of things. And so, again, I can only provide reassurances that we will continue to do our due diligence to inform our employees of their options, and the idea of a one-pager to summarize each of the plan program areas and what services they provide and who it might truly benefit with some contact or some further information attached to it makes a great deal of sense. And that's something we can definitely link to our main page, our website. So, and then again, we'll have the video library series in there that will also provide some explanations of different programs and their options. So,
Absolutely. Happy to do that. But we already have some FAQs that we had kind of done as along through the enrollment process. We'd gathered some of that through our phone calls. So we'll definitely get those published. So,
I just want to make sure that the board and the superintendent know that the Health Strategy Committee was very adamant that we needed to make sure that we do a good job of communicating all these changes and not leave any of our employees in the dark. That was a priority from the committee, so.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. Ms. Fields, when was that committee meeting that you asked for the FAQ? Do you know?
Excuse me?
When was the last meeting, when you asked for the FAQ? How long ago was that?
The last meeting that we had,
Was,
maybe a
which
couple weeks
was
ago?
November, yeah.
Okay.
November 9th.
and when do we think we'll have that?
We should be able to have it within a few days, I would hope. Yeah, within the next week, after the holiday at this point.
Thank you.
There are no further questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite Peggy Banier, our Senior Director for Facilities Maintenance, to please come forward. The next item is hers, and it pertains to us contracting for design and professional services with Rhodes and Brito Architects for BizTown at Tenorock High School.
So this is the BizTown that you heard about, I guess, board meeting or two ago. They had, JA, Junior Achievement, had presented some presentation drawings, yeah. So this is just the part that we need to, this is the contract for the architect that we need to get signed to move it forward and make it real. Go into design, do our due diligence, and so that's what this is about.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. I am so excited to see this because this has been a long time in the making, as I think we have said every meeting for the past at least 6 months. I'm not seeing it on the agenda for this evening. It may be because it's under a section I'm not thinking to look for. Is this something that we can bring back to back?
Sure. Mr. Murphy? I don't think we can at this point, because it's not been properly duly advertised.
Right, and we haven't, up to my knowledge, I don't know if this is in board docs yet, but I don't recall having reviewed or any of our law partners having reviewed any of this.
No, that would occur after this meeting, so I apologize, you caught me off guard.
Okay.
It's not common for this board to ask me to bring items back to back.
I apologize. It's just something we've
caught
been
me off
waiting
guard.
on, so I didn't realize that it wasn't on both. So, but it'll come before us in December, so we won't be waiting much longer.
So long as the contract is reviewed and approved and authorized, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Dr. Allen?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be my question, because I know that we've done things back to back in the past, and, I think being patient is important, but this one's been with us for a while, but I understand. So I don't know if this is going to be consistent across the board then, that if you're asking us to do something back to back, we can hold to this same position, that there needs to be time to review, would be my question as well. And then secondly, is the budgeted amount here, is that a part of the match that we are taking part in that came to us from the state appropriation?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I just, I think there is a timing element here because of the services being rendered already. But I was just curious, Superintendent Hyde, I don't know.
Well, I think the point that's being missed is there's not an executable contract. This is being brought to you initially for discussion. We do not execute a contract until, when we have a process that all contracts go through for review, modification, commentary, and then final approval before it comes before the board. Had that been done, then yes, we could arguably have brought it back to back, with the exception that there would not have been adequate public notice in case someone wanted to speak to that item tonight. And so the barrier is, and with all due respect, there has not been a delay with this aspect of it. So I think it's important to point out that there are some specific reasons why it can't come back to back, as we've expressed. But but we'll make sure it's ready and available for the December meeting.
Okay, I just, again, want to make sure that if we're establishing precedents on that, to be aware that if we're being asked to vote on something back-to-back in the future, and I'll make sure those things are in order as well.
Certainly. Ms. Fields?
I was just basically going to say what you said, Superintendent, is that we have to make sure that everything is in order before we move ahead. So I would think that bringing this back in December would be sufficient.
Yes, ma'am. At least we can do the public notice. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. And I apologize. I thought that once they go on the work session, they usually have been reviewed. So is that not the case with any of the contracts that'll come on the work session? Just the way that it was presented?
No, this one has not been finalized.
Okay. Thank you.
So I have something to say about that. It originally was on the November board schedule, and it was taken off. So we originally did plan for a space in between.
Okay, no further questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay.
The next item is, I'll bring up Mr. Joshua McLemore, Director for Facilities Planning and Real Estate, and he'll be joined by Mr. Fix, if needed, Associate Superintendent Facilities and Operations. This item is regarding our district-wide facilities condition assessment. Board members, as you've heard, we've talked about the fact that the school district needs to have a better understanding of the long-term implications of not necessarily having a deferred maintenance or preventative maintenance plan in place due to limited financing and other issues. What this essentially will do, just in layman's terms, is we will contract with a company, if approved. They will travel to each and every one of our schools with our staff, and they will inspect everything from roofs to asphalt, our major mechanicals, water fountains, those types of things, and they will identify the date that initially went into service, and then they will identify the expected life expectancy for those items. And then that way, as a school district, we can start planning proactively to replace these things rather than waiting for something to fail or exceed its life expectancy, so we can get a far more proactive in how we seek to address these types of maintenance issues. So it's a comprehensive process. It'll probably take, if approved, it should take anywhere from 6 to 8, maybe even 10 months to complete, because again, it requires a site visit to every single school, and then they'll come back to the district and verify. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that a school has a boiler, and many of our schools do, to provide hot water. That boiler may or may not be original to that facility. And so sometimes we may assume that it was original. That's why they have to come back to the district, cross-reference all of their documentation, because let's say the school's 25 years old and we forgot that we replaced it 20 years ago. We want to make sure that we get accurate information to the board and to others. So it's really imperative that we do that. So Josh, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, that pretty much stole a lot of my thunder, but we'll move on. First off, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to come before you again, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Welcome, Mr. Keys. It's a pleasure to work with you as well. So again, as the superintendent said, the facilities and the district as a whole, we are very eager to look at this initiative that has been well past due. And much to what the superintendent has already laid out, what is a facilities condition assessment at its core? Really think of it as a health checkup for our patient. In this regard, our patient are our facilities. What this facility condition assessment looks to accomplish is look at those basic key vital organs, if you will, but vital components to a facility to ensure that we're providing healthy, adequate educational facilities for our students and our administrators. Some of those components are basic exterior stuff. Basically, your roofs. We have to make sure we have a sealed envelope. The condition of the doors, painting. What's the condition of the paint? Because paint does actually serve as a protective barrier for our exterior facilities. Our interior systems, halls, floors, ceiling tiles, light fixtures, our HVAC systems, plumbing, fire protection services, elevator systems. To also include the overall site system, such as the condition of the asphalt and the parking lots and the sidewalks, making sure what are their condition, because these things over time, they all do have a service life, and at some point they will have to be replaced. So what the facility assessment will do is the vendor that we have identified will go through based off of their backgrounds. They do this day in and day out. We're not asking somebody who is for instance, like a general contractor who dabbles in a lot of fields. No, this is a vendor who focuses on just this kind of an activity. And they have experience doing this with regards to local municipalities, to hospitals, K-12 and post-secondary. So this is not their first rodeo. To put it in perspective, I always like to put up, well, how much gross square footage are we talking about in the Polk School District? Well, 18.2 million. Well, that's kind of a hard figure to really appreciate, but another way to think about it, the Empire State Building in New York City is approximately 2.7 million square feet. We are roughly responsible for 6.5 Empire State Buildings, day in and day out. That includes over 1,600 buildings, plus an additional 853 portables, all spanning some 3,856 acres. So that is a very tall order to ensure that we are maintaining it and we are assessing it, which is again why we are looking to go out and have a vendor come out to provide this kind of expertise, this third-party objective analysis. So why a facility condition assessment? Some may ask, well, why are you even bother undertaking this kind of a tall order? Because it is a very tall order. Well, it helps with improved decision making. It allows us to actually look at true, hard data that is objective and it can actually be justified. Cost savings, much to what the superintendent laid out. If we go ahead and pre-plan when an item needs to be replaced before it reaches critical failure, we then can prevent emergency after-hour callouts, which are extremely costly. And again, it'll protect and save the district additional costs. Then prioritization. Prioritize our repairs. Yes, when you're an administrator at a campus, you know and you breathe your campus day in and day out, and you see the issues at your campus, but you may not necessarily be privy to the entire district. Like with this, it gives us a true objective prioritization of lists of things that we need to address. And long-term planning, that strategic planning for a facility improvement, an assessment will tell us, okay, what is the best return on investment? Is it that you continue to conduct repairs, patch holes, to try to prolong the condition of a facility, or is it best to, at this time, based off the overall age, it is time for a modernization effort to help be funded by our half-penny sales tax initiative? That is what this assessment will also help provide us to identify those campuses and buildings. In terms of financial impact, in looking at the proposed current contract, which hasn't been attached to this item because, again, this is more of an informational workshop presentation, the initial contract we've been working with the vendor comes in at $2,092,743.18. This effort, we intend on to be funded by the half-penny sales tax. During our half-penny sales tax meeting, I put out that this is an initiative that the district does look to be undertaking, and while no official vote has taken yet, they have all verbally agreed that this is absolutely something that is well within the intent of that proposal for the half-penny sales tax. But the return on investment, again, we are ensuring that we are maximizing the life of our buildings and their systems. If we can ensure that we are getting that preventative maintenance schedule, we are hearing it, we make sure that we are getting every ounce of life out of an HVAC system or a plumbing fixture, we will do so. And in instances in which a fixture doesn't meet or live up to its expected life cycle, well, that's an opportunity or an item for us to look at and consider, hey, we may need to change our specs. Maybe this is an item we need to go find a different version of it, because clearly this one is not living up to the life cycle. And lastly, that this facility assessment, they are going to project out a renewal forecasting effort based off that prioritization list. Pretty much, hey, this is what you need to start tackling in the next 5 years, next 10 years, 15 to 20 years. This is a very comprehensive forecasting element for an assessment and how they're coming about their cost estimates. Again, they're sourcing nationally, but also regionally. It's not just that they are taking the average of hey, this is what the HVAC system costs across the United States. They're also diving down into what it costs for our specific region. So how are we going to get there? Before we undertake or expend anything, we have to secure funding, which, working with our lovely CFO, we've done that in trying to work it with our capital plan. Selecting a vendor, we've gone through that process. We have a draft contract, which will come back before this board for consideration as an action item in December. Next, we will start undertaking pre-deployment meetings with the vendor. The vendor is located in Texas, but we've already started having virtual meetings to go ahead and start laying out what does that timeline and action list look like. Next, once this board takes official action on it, then we start sharing data immediately in terms of as-builts. Hey, this is the kind of boiler we think we have at this school. Share as much information as we can before they start sending teams from Texas to be on-site and on-ground here. Because once they are on-site and on-ground here, they will hit the ground running. We'll do a pilot school initially to make sure we work out all the logistics and that coordination between not just school staff, but also the school-based staff, and that it is timed in a manner that is least disruptive for that school. And again, this just speaks to the collaboration. This is going to require a full district team approach to this, not just facilities. What is vital to this is that we also are talking to that school-based administrators. They live and breathe their facilities each and every day. So they know how their facilities behave, in essence, almost like a living, breathing creature. But they know what's happened at that school over time, historically. It's not just about pulling maintenance records and work orders. What's really going on there? And there's far more that be gleaned from that versus just looking at work orders. So with that, I leave this open for any discussion or questions you may have.
Mr. Sharpless?
Hey, Josh, Mr. McMore. First, I think this is a great idea. I think this is really wise for us to be doing these assessments, figuring out, where we need to, we create a plan, right? I think that's really smart. My question is more on that last slide when we talk about the collaboration, okay? I noticed, the Facilities and Operations Division, right? And then Alpha Facility Solution, which is the contractor, and school-based administration. And so my only suggestion would be, our school-based administrators, they many times are they're not at that facility necessarily always the longest, because we have to, based on the needs of the district, we move them around, right? However, a lot of times our staff, let's say that our maintenance staff and people that are on the ground, boots on the ground there, have a lot of history of background. And so I would suggest also tapping into them in addition to those three areas, just so that way, so you get a bigger picture. But I think this is really a good idea. That would be my only caution is to make sure we include some of those staff that may not be at the administration level or at the division level. So
Absolutely. Good point.
Mr. Nolte?
Great presentation, Josh. I know you're great with numbers and everything. Well, how much money do you think, just guesstimate-wise, this will save us besides, the time and everything, keeping everything updated and how old it is and how long it's going to last? Just what would be your guesstimate of savings over like a 2, 3, 4 year period?
We're talking probably, and I'm no accountant, but I could easily feel rest assured that this would be saving hundreds of thousands of dollars, because once you start talking after-hour call-outs, you're talking time and a half at least,
Right.
than just service call fees. So if we can go ahead and get ahead of this and prevent those after-hour emergency call-outs,
Right.
the savings will be felt in that alone.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Linda just whispered to me, and it would help us in terms of insurance, because it also show our insurers that we have the condition of our facilities, and it would help us with that. The other thing I want to just throw in there, if I might, is it will also improve, and we really need to improve our customer service. And that's where we've gotten so far behind the 8 ball and struggling with trying to keep up with maintenance, and understandably so. I understand how we got there. we need to get ahead of this, and we need to improve our customer service. And so I'm really hoping that this will lead to that as well. And that's really hard to put a dollar value on that.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Ms. Fields?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Once the assessments are started, I'm sure there would be surprises, things that we didn't know needed to be done. So how will those surprises be prioritized? That's my first question.
So how it will work is the teams work on a 2-week here, 1 week back, going back to Texas to where they start compiling all that information, but they will begin sharing that initial information with us. They will formalize a final report at the tail end, as along with like an executive summary district-wide. But as we encounter things that are like, listen, this is a life, limb, or eyesight kind of an issue, that takes priority, and we will address it through our current funding for our maintenance area as well.
Okay, and then my next question, and thank you. My next question is, how will this impact our capital needs list already? You might not be able to answer that until you know exactly what the situation is.
I will already say that this will lay out the plan, long-term plan of additional capital needs in terms of facilities, for sure. This is definitely going to add to that, but that's also why we're undertaking this as well, because when the initial half-penny sales tax referendum went through, there was an initial list created. Well, it's been over 15 years, and they've knocked out a lot of those items. So now it's starting to, all right, we need to start looking at the next items, the next schools to modernize, which we can glean from this.
Then my last question is, how will the pilot school be selected? Have you all thought that far ahead?
We haven't necessarily finalized on one yet, whether it should be a high school, middle school, elementary, should it be here in Bartow. We haven't reached that far yet. But both the vendor and staff both feel before we're not necessarily cutting them loose, but before you start going full speed at this, let's first walk before we run.
Correct. Thank you.
Dr. Allen?
Superintendent, I know this is something that we've heard from the superintendent as a high-need area for sure, so appreciate you bringing this forward. I would, and you actually alluded to it a little bit, so I think the question I was pondering when looking at this one is, we're thinking about that last round of projects that we had with the half-cent Sales Tax Oversight Committee. What do you see as the biggest difference in the way that we built out our priority scale on those projects comparative to what this would potentially look like?
This one will allow us a third-party objective lens to identify those needs. And again, it gives us the data to support why we are prioritizing or creating that list in such a manner. So again, we're able to rest back that we have a hard list of data, hard facts, not just conjecture or supposition.
Okay, very good. And, hearing from you that you did include the committee members in this, is this something that we were looking at? I appreciate that. And then, in that assessment process to involve our committee appointments in that process as well, I think is important.
There are no further questions or comments. Thank you. Next, I'd like to invite Teresa Griffin, Assistant Director for Policy and Public Records, as well as Chad Davis, Staff Attorney, and ask them to come. They have several board policies they'd like to introduce and speak with you about.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hyde, board members. How are you guys today?
Good afternoon.
We have about 8 policies that we're bringing for you today. Some of these policies are mandates from statute, and then some you'll see are optional. So I'll just go through them. The first one is bylaw 165, which is our meetings bylaw, and the revisions are this. I know at a previous work session there was discussion about virtual participation in school board meetings for board members to participate virtually, and so that's what this policy does. It's Neola's suggested language for adding that virtual option. It's been reviewed by Mr. Hyde and Mr. Murphy, and so that's what that policy is. The language in there is to have the option for board members to participate virtually. Are there any questions on that policy?
Dr. Allen?
Yeah, I was curious in that dialogue that was had, any concerns come forward in this process?
None?
No. Nope, there were not any concerns. They, like I said, most of this language came from Neola, and there were just like minor tweaks.
Well, Teresa, Ms. Griffin, let me elaborate a little bit further, because I think for those who may be watching later, it's not fair for them not to hear a little bit more. So the policy is not a convenience policy. It's a policy that only allows virtual participation if certain conditions can be met. One of those primary conditions is you must have a physical quorum present, so the meeting would be conducted regardless of that individual's presence. The second part is you can only be approved to participate virtually if you were traveling for school board business, or you had a family emergency, which typically would be allowed for at this point anyway. So there are very specific criteria that have to be met, and only certain reasons that would justify this. So I appreciate the opportunity to clarify that for many, because I don't want them thinking that this is a way to create a convenience opportunity for board members. Well, I just don't want to travel because I live in Davenport and I don't feel like driving to Bartow. No, that was not targeted at our incoming board member. Sorry. I don't feel like driving from Winter Haven over to Bartow. So I want to make sure we make that clarification known to everyone, because that is important. And we did look at this policy. The board had considered this policy a number of years ago. And again, based off current issues, for example, we have a board member who's not with us today, traveling on board business, essentially, or an extension of board business. So I think that's important to note, so.
Yep, and
The other thing that I wanted to bring attention to dovetail off what the superintendent said, is that this policy absolutely is not a convenience policy, but also it's dependent on the correct and functional operation of the technology
Correct.
that would be utilized, so that if you do not have a clear reception, or if there's issues that present at the time of the virtual participation, that may have a bearing on whether that board member may actually participate. So that's another issue that we, may or may not have control over, depending on the type of communications device, or the strength of the internet, if you will, or the location.
Yeah. Yeah, so just continuing on, so I appreciate the 72-hour, where did we come up with that number? I guess I was thinking about, as it relates to, there needs to be a 72-hour notice as it relates to those technological things. But, the comment on the travel, I think that's where I was struggling, because that could be abstract in a sense. So travel to conduct district and school board business. Is that only the approved travel that this board has approved for each individual board member? Is that how that would be interpreted?
I think that's contemplated as to what it is, and certainly the board policy, we could make that more express to include board-authorized travel. I mean, that certainly, that was the intent.
Certainly.
Okay.
I mean, anytime you're discussing board business, it's assumed, I assumed, that it's related to travel that you've approved as a board.
Right.
So whether it's FADS, whether it's FSBA, whether it's a national convention or convening, those types of things, if you had to travel. I'll give you a better example. 2 years ago, we were notified at the very last minute that we had to travel to Key West. And not just myself to present before the State Board of Education. This is, for those of you who are on the board, you recall that we had to turn in a turnaround option plan for Griffin Elementary School. And it required our physical presence at that site in Key West. So with just 2 weeks' notice, we secured flights, but I had to take the board chair with me. Had the board had to conduct business, the board can conduct business without me physically being present, because I can have a stand-in. The attorney can stand in my place. I can assign a deputy. I can assign chief of staff to facilitate the meeting. But if the board chair were traveling under that circumstance, clearly that's board business. They would be able to participate. If the board chair, in that example, were just traveling because they were having a weekend in Key West, no, they would not be able to participate. So I think it assumes, and if the board would, if your recommendation is we add further clarification, happy to do so. We did shop around looking for other examples of this, and this is the best language we found, but happy to refine that further as if needed to include board-approved travel or events.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Wyatt.
Thank you. The only note I would have on that is that we probably just need to remember that we only approve travel if it costs the district over $500. So I know oftentimes if we're going up to Tallahassee for one night, or that there's situations that it doesn't meet that threshold. So if we're requiring it to be something that was approved by the board, we need to make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable of submitting that, even if it's under the threshold to be approved. Something that we probably need to have on our radar. My other question was on the 72 hours. Typically, I would venture to say that for family emergencies, 72 hours you may not have 72 hours. Somebody's in the hospital and I find out the night before I need to head that way. Is that something that we can put in here, that 72 hours is for it to be
For planned events?
for planned event? I don't know if there's a way to get around that. I would think in most circumstances, if somebody has an emergency out of town, that we would try to accommodate them. I just don't want a policy that prevents us from being able to accommodate them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think this is part of what Dr. Allen was speaking to a few moments ago, too. So we can provide some further clarification. The 72 hours is intended to provide our IT team
Absolutely.
with an adequate timeline, because especially with travel, you may be on a flight for 5 hours and we can't communicate with you during that time to troubleshoot your equipment to make sure that it would work. So I needed to make sure that we had enough time for Mr. Geary and his team to adequately troubleshoot the equipment and be able to address the issues that may arise. But you raise a good point that if it's a true emergency and the board meeting is, for example, today, and your emergency happened last night and you're having to fly out, you would not be able to provide us with adequate notice. So I think we can tweak that and find some language that would address that for emergencies.
Thank you.
Mr. Sharpless?
You said that this was a policy that you got from Neola, correct?
Correct.
I was wondering if, during any of your research, you found what other school districts in Florida have a similar policy for virtual participation?
I did not look at other districts that have adopted this. This language came to us in the most recent update that Neola provided us. And so I know it went to other districts as well, so they may be in the process of adopting it. But I don't know if any have done it yet, because it's just this school year that we got it.
Well, actually, the board contemplated this same topic a number of years ago. I'm going to say 2019, 2018, 2020, 21. So it would have happened just before I transitioned. So I believe the language, that's why Neola had the language, and I think other districts were there were some changes post-COVID that were going to allow some additional flexibility under certain conditions, and that's what we based this off of. Mr. Sharpless, I did shop around for language, and so I'll have to go back through my notes to determine where I may have gotten that from when I did my query. So I'm trying to search it now. If I can find those school districts, I'll be happy to share those with you. If not, I can certainly reach out through FSBA or FADS to see who else may have adopted similar policies. It is allowed under statute, with certain conditions and criteria being met, which I believe that we address here fully in the policy that's being recommended.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Yes, sir. Ms. Fields.
So my question is, it says here, the board member's absence must be related to personal emergency, family emergency, or travel to conduct district school board business. So who's going to ensure that that is the case? Are we just taking everybody at their word?
So I can provide a response. Because here's the thing.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be a textbook response. It's just going to be me talking, right? I believe, and Ms. Fields brings up a very valid point, but you are elected officials. And the hope would be that we will continue to operate above board. If we need to put a process in place where this is evaluated, I think that starts to erode trust and confidence in each other. However, I can absolutely understand where Ms. Fields is coming from, because should someone in the community question the type of travel, then that board member may have to provide some justification or evidence that they were indeed traveling for a personal family emergency or for board business. But this board business should not, that topic and issue should be moot. Because if we make the recommended adjustments that have been discussed already, that takes care of board travel. The emergency part is, I think, what Ms. Fields is referring to. How are we going to verify that it's your family member or your medical emergency or other emergency? I don't know that I have an answer to that. I'll look at Mr. Murphy to see if he can offer anything or if there's any suggestions.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we're not the police. So, I mean, you know, this is a self-governing board in many senses. We have codes of ethics. We have certain expectations and standards. We have an oath of office that we take. So, I mean, you know, there are a number of different things that you each as individual elected board members agree to do and undertake as you serve the citizens and constituencies that you've been elected for. So, my view is if this becomes an issue, I'd repeal the policy. I wouldn't permit virtual participation if that's a problem, or if it becomes a problem. I mean, again, that's probably beyond the scope of what our discussion is tonight. But to answer the question, it would, as the superintendent noted, it would presume board members are being straightforward, are being fully disclosure and honest, transparent, and straightforward, as I'm sure you all are based on the oaths that you take and the rules that govern the conduct of our elected school board members. And I'm not trying to be naive about it. I don't have any further dialogue to offer on that.
And that's fine.
You can move on to the next one.
Okay, policy 5330.01 is our self-administered medication policy, and this is just a change to terminology. It's from House Bill 883. It just changes metered dose inhaler to short-acting bronchodilator. I always mess that word up, I'm sorry. Policies 5610 and 5611 are all based off Senate Bill 7002. So this is our removal of out-of-school suspension, disciplinary placement, and expulsion of students policy, and then our due process rights policy. And it just makes, it's revised regarding alternative agreed to methods of parental notice. So if a student is suspended or expelled, there's language now that allows for, we normally notify parents via U.S. mail, which we will still continue to do, but there's also the option for parents to be notified by a method of their choosing. So that may be phone call, email, you know, whatever, but we're still also sending it via U.S. mail the way we always have. It just allows for notification a different way as well. And then policy 5780 is our student and parents' rights policy, and it just incorporates what we just talked about with the medications, and then it also has the language in there regarding parental notice for suspensions and things of those nature. And then there's also additional language in there about New World scholarships. Any questions on those few policies?
Mr. Sharpless?
Yes, I have some questions on 5780.
Okay.
And so I'm going to start with what the actual changes that were being made.
Okay.
And I have some other questions about some of the other part of the policy that's not necessarily being changed.
Okay.
We'll talk about that parental notice. I don't, and this may be more of a procedural thing, but I don't see anything in there about effort to be made to contact the parent or guardian directly prior to sending this U.S. mail, or alternative method that was decided specifically before the student leaves campus that day. You know, if we're going to suspend somebody, I think a phone call, something needs to be made prior to just a letter being sent.
Right, and the way Mr. Butler explained it to me is that is happening. That is happening, but we also are required to send it via U.S. mail. We're still doing that, but we are talking to parents. Sometimes we're giving it to them in person. If they come up there, we may also be emailing it to them, but we still also send it via U.S. mail. So even though we're doing some of these alternative methods, which is first reaching out to the parent via phone or however, whatever contact information we have for them, but then also the U.S. mail, if that makes sense.
It does. So should something be put in policy saying that we're doing that? That we're attempting to contact them prior to the student leaving campus that day?
I don't know that the board wants that. I mean, I'm not going to tell the board what they should put in policy or not. That's more of a procedural item, and that's common practice right now. Schools typically provide at least 3 attempts to communicate with a parent. And not only will we send something home by mail, if need be, we send it home certified mail requiring a signature, especially with issues like attendance, withdrawals, things like that. So I will tell you, it's common practice for our administrators to make multiple phone calls to parents. They also send home a copy of the referral with a student if and when it's age appropriate. And then we send home either an electronic or we mail home a notification. If the board wants to expand the policy further, if that's the recommendation, they'll come up with language for it. But I think at that point, it's really more of a, how do we procedurally address that rather than putting it in policy? That would be my recommendation, but I defer to the board. It's your policy.
Okay. All right, something to stew on. Some of my other things, questions I have on this policy are not things that you're actually changing. These are things that were already part of the policy.
Okay.
And so I'm not sure if you're prepared to answer these. I
Okay.
probably should have emailed them rather than, but it was just something that when I was reading through the policy, it came up. So right before that parental notice, there's a section there, or like it's a sentence that's on its own little paragraph. It says, if the parents cannot agree on a significant decision about the student's education or on matters affecting the health, safety, or welfare of the student, the school will take action based on what it considers to be in the best interest of the child. I'm wondering if that's the school's role or if that should be more of a court of law thing. If we're talking about student and parent rights, are we overstepping our bounds? That's a question, just philosophically, I have. If parents can't agree on something, does that mean the school makes that decision, or should that go more towards, a court of law or something like that? Just as I was reading it, as I was going to that section we're changing.
Right.
So something I've read that kind of caught me off guard.
So the only thing I can add to that is that child's best interest is kind of a standard that's usually applied. That does precede the Parents' Bill of Rights that was codified in the statute. I think our practice now, we deal with this quite a bit in the legal department where we have parents, usually they're divorced, and so there's a battle going on over who has access. And we typically don't get involved without a court order. We provide, the student records. We comply with the wishes of both parents. Sometimes there's some contention there. We do have, I believe, we have a decision maker that's on our record that we usually defer to. So that's, procedurally how that works. But when we have someone who's challenging that, if it's related to providing them student records or decision-making, we still maintain their rights until we have that court order. We don't get in the middle of that. So when it comes to making a decision, maybe that's against a parent's wishes in the best interest of the child, I'm really not aware of what that looks like in practice. But I know as far as a standard goes, that is a very common standard you typically see, and it's something that's often debated every year with all sorts of different laws, not just in the school setting, but in all sorts of childcare setting.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. And I have one other area that I just wondering if we need to potentially expand. If you look at health issues, that section B, school entry health exams, it says a student shall be exempt from the requirement of health examination upon written request from their parent stating objections on religious grounds.
Where is this?
This would be third page, B, school entry health examinations.
Gotcha.
You see it? Okay, so it just said, the question I have is,
Gotcha.
there might be other reasons other than just religious grounds that someone doesn't want to have that, have their child have that school entry health examination. So I was wondering, do we have leeway legally to change policy on that? To, if a parent objects to it for any reason?
Under the, again, referring back to the Parents' Bill of Rights, we probably do, with moral or conscientious objections. We'd have to look at that. Again, this precedes all of that. A lot of that's really the reason why those parents' rights were codified, was because we were relying on, court precedent and court decisions, and now we have it all in writing. So that will probably be something that's definitely open for discussion. We do have the Parents' Bill of Rights in our policy, so if there was a conflict, we're going to rely on that, lean on that. But we'd have to look at that a little bit further. We weren't prepared to discuss that.
Agreed. And again, this is just me floating the idea out there. I'm not saying we have to change it right now, just something for us to think about for the future.
Sure.
That's all I have.
Ms. Fields?
So Superintendent Hyde, you had referenced about U.S. certified mail, but the statement doesn't have certified. Should that be added on that first sentence? Parents normally receive notice by U.S. mail.
So the way I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The way Mr. Butler explained it to me is for suspensions, we're just sending it regular U.S. mail. For expulsions, we're sending certified mail. So they're not treated equally.
Okay.
So that's why it just says U.S. mail, but sometimes it is certified if it rises to that level. There's the extra layer of certification.
And so we're just assuming that when we send it by U.S. mail, that they're going to receive it.
Yes, ma'am, we're sending it to the address that we have on file.
And what if, this might not be a question that you can answer, and Superintendent, maybe not even you, it might be Mr. Butler. What happens if they don't get the correspondence in the mail?
So there are a number of reasons why they may not get the correspondence. We may have an incorrect address. It could have been poor data entry. They could have provided us the accurate address, but we entered it incorrectly. But typically, we don't send certified mail outside of specific legal issues that we're attempting to address. So normal correspondence would be through traditional U.S. mail. We don't have a mechanism to ensure that that has been delivered adequately, other than asking parents every year when they register their children to ensure that all of their information that's contained within our system continues to be accurate. But that's also why the phone call, a copy being sent home, an email, and traditional snail mail, as we call it, U.S. Postal Service, are multiple steps that we take rather than just relying on a singular one of saying, well, here's your referral, give this to mom and dad when you get home, because that's not likely to happen.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Sharpless, just to give you a little bit of background, in the state of Florida, there are several options for vaccine exclusion, for options. And it's not captured there. So for example, there could be a medical reason why a child cannot receive a certain vaccine due to the proteins or things that are contained within that vaccine. So we can definitely look at the language that's currently out there and see if we need to modify that policy further.
Yeah, that's all I was saying. There might be other reasons other than just religious.
Yes, sir. You can move on.
I just want to add one more thing about the mail piece. That Senate Bill 7002, that was the dereg bill that we were pushing for. And the reason they added the alternative methods in there, that is strictly statutory, coming straight out of that bill, because we were statutorily required to provide it by mail the way we were doing it. So really, it's giving us that flexibility, but everything procedural, that's definitely something for us to consider. And you may strengthen that policy if you want to, for you to know that the language we're getting, that is strictly lifted out of that deregulation bill that became law.
Thank you. The next three policies that are before you are policies that are updated based on changes in the law, to statute changes, but the implementation of them is optional. So it's our criminal background screening for contractor access and then our volunteers policy. You'll see optional language that's in there regarding school chaplains. And then policy 9700 is relations with special interest groups. There's language in there. That's language that's required to be in policy, but it's optional whether or not we allow patriotic or these specific listed patriotic organizations on campus during instructional time. The law just says that if we allow one, we allow all. So these are policies that we wanted to bring to the board for you guys to discuss so that we can determine how you may want to move forward on that. Like I said, these are the school chaplain and the special interest groups. These are optional things for you to discuss.
And before we begin that discussion, I want to offer some context. Now, I want to begin with the policy 9700, relations with special interest groups. And as Ms. Griffin said, this one, you'll notice, did not come with any options to consider. It just came with recommended language for us to put in here. And a little bit of background on this policy, this law that passed last session. This began as a push by the Boy Scouts of America. They, when I grew up, they would come to your classroom, they would pitch, Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, and it was a recruiting mechanism. It was very successful. Over the years, there's been some tightening up over the access that's been provided to public groups that might include the Boy Scouts. And the intent with this bill, when it came forward, was really they were trying to mandate access. And that's not what we got. What we got is a voluntary, we still have control over whether we provide that access. But that was what the push seemed to be. We've even seen it since the law was passed. We've gotten requests or even demands from groups saying this law now allows me the right. It does not do that. What the law does do is it outlines patriotic organizations based on the federal law. If you're wondering where that list came from of the different groups, that actually comes straight out of federal law. And then it says that we may provide them access. If we do provide them access, it then gives certain rights to what they can do and what we must do, including providing notice to parents and the option for them to withhold their child from those presentations. Now, we're talking about during school instructional hours access. We're not talking after school. So that's really what this is all about. The law is worded in such a way that it says we do not have to provide equal access to an organization that is not designated as one of these, which the argument would be made that we would provide equal access to a group that is one of these. So we would not, and there was a lot of debate over that, we would not be able to say the Boy Scouts can come recruit, but the Girl Scouts cannot. So the reason why this language is recommended for us to put in here is because it spells out all those rights, and it doesn't leave us vulnerable to a decision being made by, say, a principal or administrator to allow one group and not the other. This protects us more than anything else. And this language does not say that we're doing this. It just says that we may but are not required to. So Neola recommends it. I recommend it, that this is probably good language for us to have in place. And then the conversation we can have is whether, you think we should go forward with that, with the access, that is.
If I may too, board members, I had received at least one inquiry from one of your peers asking, because in this language, it says that they have to be qualified, that a voluntary school chaplain is a qualified person who has volunteered to fulfill the role. And so I was asked, well, how do we define qualified? So I have sent you, when you do the search, they basically have to have a bachelor's degree in religious studies or biblical studies, or a religious degree from a seminary. They have to be ordained. They have to receive an endorsement or be accredited. They have to attend clinical pastoral education courses, or be board certified. So I've forwarded that to you so that you have a record of that. I do believe that this might be an edit or a revision, or that revision that we need to take and place into the policy if need be, if the board decides to move forward with this, because I don't want there to be an ambiguous term out there as to what deems someone qualified. And so again, this is what the standard is presently, and I'm sure that we can receive additional feedback from others as to other criteria we may want to consider, but I wanted to make sure you're aware that there is a definition of qualified that we can lean on. Mr. Sharpless.
That was actually going to be my first question, so thank you for answering that. So now that was answered, I do have one other question or suggestion. Under B, let me make sure we're at 9200.
Okay.
the volunteers.
Sorry, I haven't started talking about 9,200 yet.
Oh, okay.
This was 9,700 in the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, the patriotic organizations. So I apologize. We can go ahead and move on to that one because I think that's going to generate the most conversation. So
Ms. Fields? And then Dr. Allen.
Sure.
Okay, when I read this proposed policy, I was very concerned. And who determines what organization is patriotic? And how is it that some that are very similar, even to the work that we do at Girls Inc., we're not patriotic, but they are. And that's very unsettling for me. So my question is, I see that it's a federal law. I would like to know the number of the federal law, and I would say that I would not be in support of this. I am not going to support something that basically exclude organizations, and not just Girls Inc., but other organizations that I know that's as patriotic as all these that's listed here. They're great organizations, don't get me wrong, but I think that, in my opinion, it's very discriminatory to say that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is patriotic, but then all these others are not.
Sure, and that was a conversation in Tallahassee when they passed this law. The federal law is Title 36 USC. I can get you the bill analysis and everything from that law for you to consider, but this is strictly lifted out of the statutes. So, that we don't have to allow any of these groups access, but if we allow one of them, we have to allow all of them. We can still provide equal access to any groups we decide, including Girls Inc. or any of the other groups, so it doesn't limit us from doing that. The policy language is just to put us in compliance with the law, because if we were to allow one of those groups that's listed there, and we didn't allow another one, we would then be in violation of state law.
If you can provide me with that, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Dr. Allen?
Yeah, so I appreciate Ms. Fields' comments on that. Was definitely pondering that same. So when state statute came in and, we're discussing the idea of what a patriotic organization is, this is the only list that was referenced in the adoption of state statute?
Yes, and it's the frustrating thing is if you go back and look at the federal law language, it says including but not limited to. So that does kind of create an issue there, but yeah, this is this is lifted straight out of the statute and the bill analysis. All of those organizations, which we don't list them in name, but you got Big Brothers and Big Sisters of America, Boy Scouts of America, Boys and Girls Clubs of America, Civil Air Patrol, Future Farmers of America, Girl Scouts of the United States of America, Little League Baseball Inc., Marine Corps League, and Naval Sea Cadet Corps. So putting this into policy is to protect us, but as far as what the access that we do allow, I certainly think that's open for discussion and a decision that we can make at the school district level to provide more access to the groups that we also want to include. This just says if we allow one of these particular groups in, we have to allow the rest that are listed in this group.
Okay. Yeah, again, these are great organizations. We've had representatives from these organizations presenting with us. But yeah, I'm with Ms. Fields on the way that this is being read, or maybe the way that I'm reading it as well.
And if I may, I think the problem they were trying to solve was not one that we deal with here in Polk County. I believe the issue is you may have some school districts that were choosing not to allow one of these particular groups in for whatever reasons they may have. So they were trying to get access as opposed to trying to limit access.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Sharpless?
I actually have a comment on this one as well. So the list of the patriotic organizations, I think, is also somewhat troubling because you have extracurricular organizations in there, and then you also have, for example, Future Farmers of America is an intracurricular organization. So that goes with the curriculum that's in the school. So it's very difficult to say we won't allow an organization like that. Let's say if we didn't allow one of these, then to not allow an organization that's directly tied in with our curriculum, that would be an issue. So then, because we allow an organization that's directly tied with our curriculum into our school, then do we have to let all those into the school? I think that's very troubling. And again, I know this isn't you guys. This is from the legislation, but to me, there's big differences in those organizations, especially when it goes to our educational environment. So that's the only comment I'm going to make.
No further questions or comments on that item.
Okay, now the one that I think we're going to generate a lot of conversation here. This is regarding the chaplain program. And to provide a little more context on that, when you look, if you've looked at it, the bill analysis you were not provided, but looking at, following the legislative history, what I found most interesting, the bill analysis spends a lot of time talking about all the student mental health services that we provide and fund for. There's a little bit of history here about the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School Public Safety Act. And so the context here of providing the chaplain services really seems to be rooted in that mental and social, emotional health of our students, and trying to provide them alternative means of counseling or, some access to others who can help them in these areas. It does not seem to be trying to provide for further extracurricular activity or organization on campuses of a religious nature. So I just want to give that background, that context a little bit. The reason, as stated by the bill sponsor, why he brought that to the legislature was because currently these services that they're seeking to provide that are of a faith-based nature are not authorized. And, what it really comes down to is the establishment clause and what we have to provide that balance of not promoting a particular faith. So what this policy, you'll notice we did not choose any options for you because this is strictly open for discussion, and we would have to come back with further refinement of this before we could even move forward. So this is not the only time we're going to be discussing this policy. We're just bringing it to you for that preliminary discussion. And I would also say that of all the school districts I've polled and the attorneys I've talked to, none of them have adopted this yet. There may be some that haven't responded, but to my knowledge, no other school district has yet adopted this policy. This one is strictly optional. You do not have to adopt this policy. I believe the only other school district that has brought it up once was Miami-Dade, but then they sent it back for further review and they asked the Attorney General for some guidance. And the Attorney General has since asked the Department of Education for guidance. And since this language came out from Neola, the Department of Education has provided a model policy that has even further restrictions to it that we can provide you, so you can see what they're offering as some alternative language as well. So that would be part of the ongoing conversation. You'll see that there are really two components to this. One is how the chaplains would be selected, and we'll discuss that in a second. And the other is the responsibilities. You can limit exactly what these chaplains are allowed to do and are not allowed to do. So first, if you look at the first section on school chaplains, the qualification part. And before I begin, the very first section of this does spell out very clearly that parents must provide written, informed consent to allow their student to be a part of any chaplain relationship or service. So this is not something where you're going to have chaplains starting a youth group on campus recruiting kids. That cannot happen. With the parents have to provide that informed written consent for the chaplain services. Then you look at the qualifications. There's two options here. One would be any person the superintendent concludes can fulfill the responsibilities. And you will notice that the superintendent is a lowercase s. When we deal with our policies, capital S superintendent means superintendent or his delegate. Lowercase s means the superintendent himself. So Mr. Hyde under this policy would be the one who would make that determination. The other option is, for purposes of this policy, a chaplain shall be a person who obtains an ecclesiastical endorsement from their faith group certifying that such chaplain is, and then it lists the three different things: a minister, rabbi, priest, imam, lay leader, or similar functionary of the faith group, qualified spiritually, morally, intellectually, and emotionally to serve as a chaplain for the board, and sensitive to religious pluralism and able to provide for the free exercise of religion by all students. The Department of Education language goes even further and requires a certain level of education in counseling and theology. So there's some tighter restrictions there if you wanted to consider those kind of qualifications. But this is really, these two options, you're really trying to limit who would be considered a chaplain. Before we move on, there's some discussion at all about what you might want to see there?
Mr. Sharpless?
Yes, I personally would prefer something a little more spelled out. So I would not want under qualifications the first option where it's just up to the basically superintendent to decide, who's qualified and who's not. While I have a lot of faith in this superintendent, he won't be here forever. So I would
I want that responsibility.
casting lots, or anyhow. But the second option is what I would prefer, and then also, it was going back to what you just emailed us. On number 2, qualified spiritually, morally, intellectually, and emotionally. How do we qualify that? And so I think we need to make sure. I think we need something more specific on that number 2 piece. I think the other parts is understandable, but that number 2, how do we qualify that? And that answer might be that email you just sent.
And I do believe that this is the crux of it, trying to determine who you want to bring into the school district without discriminating based on religion. That is the fine line, and I believe that the Department of Education recommended language that has some tighter restrictions there is probably a better way to go. Like I said, I believe they required a bachelor's degree and then also a master's with a certain number of hours, or the equivalent of, like, I think 7 years of experience within, so there's some things there that are a little more objective, but give some tighter guidelines on who would qualify with that. So we can consider that, and we can come up with a way that would meet, yeah.
And I'm just one board member, but I would prefer that.
And also, I think that'll tie into our conversation on the second part. When you start thinking of the responsibilities that you may want to allow a chaplain to be a part of, those, especially when you're dealing with counseling or spiritual direction, you may really want someone who actually has experience doing that and is not just, someone who wants to come and share their faith, but someone who actually knows how to provide these services that are related to the mental and spiritual well-being of the students in the context of our schools.
Ms. Wyatt?
Thank you. It's rare that we get a policy that you don't have your, what your preference would be checked. So what would as far as implementation, what do you think makes the most sense implementation-wise, or what would be your preference?
I have concerns with 2 parts. The first part was ensuring that we're a little bit more concrete and explicit in the qualifications aspect. And much to Chad's credit, what he just said is probably one of the most important parts. Being ordained or being a minister or serving in that capacity does not necessarily mean that you have the experience to counsel children. So I think we need to think that part through. I have some concerns, and I need to reach out to some of our faith-based leaders because under the responsibilities, bullet number 6 is a direct contradiction with what many of our faith-based leaders are taught as it relates to confession. And this requires them to disclose this information to us, and I'm not sure that that's something they're willing to accept. So I think we need, again, this is the first reading for this, and I intentionally did not intercede in this topic because I wanted you to be able to bring your own personal perspectives to this without any perceived influence. But this is one that, as a Catholic, I would want to get some clarification on. How does a chaplain overcome that issue of having to report something that's been divulged to them in confession? There's some serious implications for that, and I'm a little uncomfortable with that without getting some guidance from them, even if it's from the Archdiocese or whomever else we need to reach out to. But I think everything else that you all have brought up, in the right parameters, With parental consent, I take no issue with it. I think it's not a bad thing, but I think we have to be very careful in how we define these. And many of you will recall some of the initial knee-jerk reactions to this stemmed around, well, if you let one religious faith-based group in, you must allow all. And that extended to, well, we're going to bring Satanists into our schools. If they meet the qualifications, what does that mean for us? So again, initial reading, initial conversation, a lot more for us to look at and bring back to you. Ms. Fields has asked for the federal policy on some other things, and so these were good examples of policies that you're not required to adopt, but they're good discussions for you to have out in the open.
Thank you. Just I would agree with Mr. Sharpless on, while I 100% respect your decision-making skills, Superintendent Hyde, I think that burden should not fall on your shoulders.
Thank you.
But as far as, those below, I think we've heard a lot of the same concerns, and I think that this is a great opportunity. But I want to make sure that the team is prepared to implement it once we adopt it, and I'm assuming what it looks like would be similar to our book policy that we put out, and you can select which books you can or cannot read, that we would have similar policy or procedure around that. So I would just want to make sure that before we adopt it, we have those procedures ready and that we've thought through what the actual implications are. But I would love to see us reach out to the faith-based community, as you've indicated, to get feedback from them on how to best implement. Because I think you also run into, if we can, who signs up? Is it something that they even know is available, and how do we make sure that there's people taking advantage of it?
I even go back to the question of, and I talked about this with one of your colleagues when I started receiving some questions. How do I ensure that every faith is represented at every school? I don't know that I can guarantee that, and I don't know that the policy needs to guarantee that. But back to my question, where disclosure of information could potentially put clergy in direct conflict with their rules and expectations and their ethics. I mean, I hate to do this to him, but I know he's sitting here. And if the board would allow me, Bishop, if you feel comfortable, would you mind coming up and sharing your thoughts? The policy would require you, if you met with a student with parental permission, and that student disclosed to you they were pregnant, something happened, they had committed a criminal offense, and you, based off your training, you're not to disclose that, but this policy and statute would require you to disclose that. Would you mind sharing your thoughts, or would you like to contemplate that and talk with me separately? Or I hate that I'm putting you on the spot like this, but you're here. Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir. All right. Ms. Fields, I apologize.
No problem. I can't believe Bishop said we'll talk. I think this is very premature. I think it's nice to have this conversation, but I think there are too many things, too many elements that we are not aware of. As many of you all know, my son is in the ministry, and he has a dream to one day be a chaplain, but there's a process. They have to get thorough training. They just can't say because they're ordained and this and that, and no disrespect to anybody who's ordained, that they are equipped to be a chaplain. So I think we need some implementation procedures in place. I think the research that the superintendent has referenced is needed, and I think we need to just table this and come back at another time with more information.
Mr. Sharpless?
I only have one other thing, and that's on the responsibilities. Another thing to throw out there. I'm not saying that this has. I just want to throw it out there. Chaplains meeting alone with students, just a potential concern, and that also might be something that, with confession and that kind of stuff, you have a one-on-one. So now we have an adult. There's no supervision there, one-on-one with the child. There might need to be something in policy about guarding against that as well, because you never know. It's a concern as a parent.
Dr. Allen?
Thank you, Superintendent. I mean, I would say I have some confidence in you that you would have some very deep spiritual question to ask somebody to determine their qualifications. But yes, I'm with everybody else. We don't want to put that burden on you. But I mean, I definitely think time and place, I'm pondering that. I'm not seeing anything related to those two areas here. What determines the time that this could take place? Or then, as Justin, Mr. Sharpless is noting, the place. Are we now carving out space on every school grounds for this, the support services and programs to take place? So I have concerns about that as well in that very opening sentence. That's not clearly defined in any way. So definitely, I see the value as it relates to broader culture and so forth, but I'm definitely seeing some issues with where the policy's at right now.
Well, we'll definitely bring this back. I see Ms. Wyatt still has comments. So I just want to assure the board that we'll follow up with several of your requests. As Mr. Davis pointed out, there was essentially a dear colleague letter that was released. We can provide a copy of that. And then we'll work through some of the questions and concerns that we have, and I'll be able to spend some time reaching out to Bishop and to others to see how they feel about some of these. But essentially, yes, to Dr. Allen's questions, we would have to identify appropriate office space with a door that has a window, all the things that we do, whether or not a student's meeting with a counselor or an administrator. So we would have to follow the same procedures. They'd all still have to go through the level 2 background check, those types of things. So, they're volunteers essentially on our campus. They're not paid. And so I don't know if they're going to be able to have a daily schedule versus, having to schedule 1 or 2 days a week at schools. There's a lot to this that will have to evolve as if and when we move forward with something like this. So your questions and your commentary is really good for us because it gives us reflective opportunities to go back and say, how do we tweak and refine this further? And again, we knew that this would be something you'd want to talk about, you'd have insight on, so thank you for the feedback today. Ms. Wyatt.
Thank you. Most of my comments you touched on, but I just was going to request that before this comes back to us again, if you had mentioned meeting with some of our faith-based leaders, but really workshopping with them some of the opportunities here and what it looks like moving forward. I don't think we're in a rush to do this, so if that can't happen before the holidays and this doesn't come back to us until January, I think I'm only one board member, but I think that would be appropriate, that we'd rather get it right than try and.
We have more than enough time to address both of these topics, this and the political groups or political visitors. So I think there's a lot to contemplate here, and we would not want the board to feel compelled to rush in any way, nor have you ever given me the impression that you're going to be pushed to a decision prematurely. So thank you for that, and yes, ma'am, we'll develop an appropriate timeline and bring it back to the board.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Fields?
In addition to the faith-based community, I think it would be good to also reach out to the municipalities, because some of the municipalities, I think all of them probably have a chaplain, I would think.
Yes, ma'am. There are no further questions and comments on that item. Thank you both. Really, they don't get enough credit. While Neola typically provides us with skeleton language, they really have the unenviable obligation to go back, confer, cross-reference it with state statute, look at existing board policies. There's a lot of work that goes into bringing these things to you. And as you know, over the last few years, the legislature has just churned through changes, and it's difficult for them to keep up. And so I remember board members, many of you can reflect on a few months ago when we were bringing 20, 30 changes in policies to you, and that's just simply the cyclical nature of how the legislative session works and how it has potential impact for us. But I just wanted to publicly acknowledge both of you for all your work. I appreciate your insight too. Thank you. Board members, we're going to do one more item and then I'll go ahead and give you a break. And I'm saying that for the record so that the crew behind the wall can prepare for that. So the next item is Head Start Services Report. Ms. Carrie Barkins here with us, Director for Preschool Programs.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So a quick report. It has our normal Head Start Services report, which shows our enrollment, our staffing vacancies. But I also included the response. As you know, I came in February, March, and let you know that we did receive a non-compliance during our federal monitoring for a fiscal issue. Basically, it was locating iPads and laptops. As we switched over to the new Incident IQ, we worked closely with Ann Pasco's team. They were phenomenal help. We submitted a corrective action plan. I had a review meeting with the Office of Head Start on August 7th, and I received notification last month that they have closed it. We provided a corrective action that was accepted to ensure that that won't happen again. And that was all. Simple. Any questions?
Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Board members, at this time, it's 2:41. We will recess for 15 minutes and come back at 2:56.
you can please lead us in the rest of our meeting.
Yes, sir. The next item up is Ms. Leanne Bennett and Ashley White from Workforce Development, and they are going to present on a grant.
Yes, we have our civics grant to present to you today. It is for our adult education and family literacy, English literacy, and civics education. The grant total is $285,985. This is a $53,000 increase from last year. And the funds benefit full-time and part-time ESOL staff at East and West Area adult schools, material supplies, and ESOL books. Project period is from 7/1 to 6/30, and our target audience is our ESOL students. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Seeing none, thank you. Next up is Ms. Ann Pasco, Assistant Superintendent for Information Systems and Technology, with information about our SAP Cloud services and upgrades.
Afternoon. Happy to see everybody again. Before I start, I want to make sure that, oh, I just lost some lights. All right. I think you made it.
I got my one. I'm good. I need my.
Here we go.
Thank you.
The orange ones, right?
Yes, ma'am.
What a way to start our SAP modernization. All right, so as Mr. Hyde said, I'm Ann Pasco, Assistant Superintendent of IST. Before I start, I think it's important that we recognize this is a group upgrade. This modernization of SAP, our current ERP system, impacts the entire operational system. I would first like to recognize everyone in the audience who's been in an SAP upgrade meeting. Please go ahead and stand. This is your team. This is the team that represents who's here. We have facilities, we have recruiting, personnel, risk, payroll, business analysts, web apps, training, software development. Who have I missed? Certification. So I want to make sure that they get a little bit of recognition. I might stand in front of you, but this is the team that's been with me since August to predict this. So thank you very much for all of your assistance. So with that, we're going to jump in. With that, we're going to jump in real quick, and we're going to look at why do we need to do this? Why didn't we need to modernize? Well, we pretty much know why, but let's quantify it. Currently, we have inconsistent processes. We've talked about that a lot. You've talked about it as a board. It drives us to inefficiencies in our work, and inefficiencies in our work cost us dollars. It causes us to have to rework things, and it leads us to multiple data sources. You've also heard Mr. Hyde say we're a data-rich district, but it's in so many different places, we can't capture that so that we can take actionable decisions to move forward. This current implementation of our system impedes timely employee onboarding. I know this has been discussed at the board, has been brought up by HR before, and has been brought up from employees as a concern. We're burdened by customizations. So what that means is when we initially implemented this system, we decided we would not take the fit to standard. We would not do the standard SAP, and we would customize. That means we're dependent on who we can hire to program, who we can find to do this work. We're not able to capitalize on modernization as it comes down. So an easy way to understand that is if you have a cell phone and you have an app that you like, and you notice that maybe only 30 people have used that app, you're dependent on that one programmer using that app, as opposed to if you have an app on your cell phone that thousands of people have used. When they can modernize that, you will get the benefit of those updates. Sometimes a little too many, but you'll still get that benefit. We know we have complex manual payroll and approval processes. We don't have our visibility to payroll. We don't have our visibility to our data insights. And we have cybersecurity risk. What I mean by that is everything we house right now is on-prem. So we are in charge of all of that cybersecurity, which is a little scary. And our support for ECC 6.0, that's the current version, ends after 2027. So what will this do for us? What will our modernization do? This will let us align ourselves to industry best practice so that we can be efficient and more effective. We will have timely employee onboarding. We will do fit to industry standard. We'll have an automated payroll and self-service option. So I'm going to pause for a second and explain what that means. What that means is we won't have staff portal. Every staff member in the district will log into SAP and they will have a dashboard, and the dashboard will let them see their data. They'll confirm their address, just like you were talking about before with parents with addresses. I can confirm my address is correct, and if my address is not correct, I can make a change, and that change gets approved by payroll. We have a double check. It also lets us use that type of information that can make sure that we've entered things correctly. It's called data validation. We'll be able to use that. I can see in real time what my paycheck is. We will streamline the paycheck. I can understand it easier. I can see real time if I've submitted time to leave, I've submitted vacation time. I submit that instead of manually handing that to a secretary for them to submit. So we reduce that inefficiency of that process. It's all right there for everyone to see. There is an org chart so that everyone in the organization can see the org chart and can see it visually right there in Employee Central. And we can ensure that all these pieces are aligned together. That goes into the payroll visibility and the data-driven insights. Reports for Ms. Jenkins and her team, budget reports. Currently, it's difficult as a school principal to understand what your budget is without really having an accounting degree. And they will be able to use that and look at that data in an actionable way to make decisions moving forward with their building. We also will be taking, right now, as I said, SAP is on-prem. We will be taking it to the cloud. So what that means is we will be taking our SAP instance and it will go to the cloud. It will be managed there. So we will not be managing the cybersecurity for SAP anymore. The best way I can explain that to you is during the hurricanes, my biggest fear is that something happens and we can't make payroll. That won't be a worry because if we have a hurricane, our data is not housed here, our data is housed in the cloud, and we know we'll still get that support. Additionally, by being in the cloud, we get support for doing all the back-end work. Things that we call transports, having to have multiple systems, move things around, all of that is supported by SAP, so we know we are taking advantage of their personnel, which means optimizing the ERP management. So, benefits. What does this look like? I've talked about a couple of them. Essentially, we looked at benefits in work hours reallocated. It's very difficult to look at benefits and saving money because when you do that, you think it's actually money you can go spend somewhere else. So it's often about the money that we would have to spend to keep up. Currently, we're spending $1.2 million a year on SAP for our current implementation and our support of it. So when we look at what these benefits are, we're talking about payroll and the man hours that they're spending, HR and the man hours they're spending, frustration of an employee that they have to make 4 phone calls to get something done. Another interesting piece would be Mr. McLemore here. So the plant maintenance module within SAP, they're doing all this work to gather the information to find out what age do we have of our buildings and what do we need to do. Well, what are we going to do with that information when we get it? That's going to go into the modernized plant maintenance in SAP, which lets them plan ahead. We want to make sure we have all of this available so that historical knowledge is great. Our employees are amazing and wonderful, but we want to make sure as employees come and go and transition in and out, the district has that knowledge and keeps that there in a system that we can still manage moving forward. As we continue through here, I want to talk about the timeline. The timeline, the project starts going to be in 2025. It's going to end in September 2026. That's a pretty fast timeline. The timeline has been shared with everyone here. Everyone knows what that is. We know what kind of work it's going to take. There's 2 phases. Phase 1 is success factors. That starts in February of 2025, and that's that front-facing piece for employees. So they can start to see that dashboard, see their information. It's HR, onboarding, recruiting, certification, compensation. During that time, we have 5 phases. We start with prepare. We've kind of already started that a little bit in talking about what does it need to look like in order to get a quote. And that's when we look at what is our content, how are we going to have a best practice approach. Then we go to explore, which means we're going to look at what is SAP standard and how do we create our processes, our documentation, our procedures to fit what's best practice for these pieces. Deploy is where we're going to train. So we're going to have training for employees. We have a training department. In fact, our trainer is in the audience here. We make sure we train. We get information so that employees see that. They get a practice area. They get to play with it before it just becomes something that they do. Realize means we are building it, we're testing it, we do test cycles, all of that good stuff. And then at the end, we deploy it, which is where we cut over, but then we also have a series of weeks called hypercare, which we're paying ultimate vigilance to. That will wrap up in March of 2026. In June of 2025, we'll start the finance piece where we'll do the exact same thing, but we'll do it on the finance side. And we'll make sure we have budget, grants, plant maintenance, assets over $5,000, all of that will come in. It'll all still be aligned to Red Book. It's all based upon best practice, and that will be finalized in September of 2026. In your board packet, you do have the budget impact analysis. It tells you the first 3 years. That was only because the form had 3 years on it. And I didn't ask permission to modify it. So I wanted to make sure I shared with you that there is a steady state cost. The steady state cost does offset current costs that we already have. So the steady state costs come in around $3 million. However, remember, we're paying $1.2 million now. That's included in that steady state cost. Additionally, since we're going to the cloud, we will not be continuing to upgrade the data center. So we will offset off the hardware cost and support services that we would need to have for software to support that data center. I know I went through it awful quick, but I also know you've had lots of great conversation about topics today. So with that, I'll pause and see what questions you might have for me.
Thank you. I am so excited about this upgrade because I think that, I'm probably not alone in the number of complaints that we get about finding things on our system, and I don't think that anyone will grieve not having access to the staff portal anymore. I think this will be a much needed and exciting replacement. My question is obviously because our timeline is so expansive with this project, the report that we get only shows the 3 years during implementation. Following implementation, I know there's some expenses now, I'm assuming, so where is that as far as cost benefit for moving forward? Is it going to be, what is the impact of the budget after it's all implemented?
So we can provide for you what the total impact of the budget is, and the reason we didn't do that is because it'll be approximately $3 million in fees, but currently we're paying $1.2 million. So additionally, the part that I'm not completely sure about is what will we not need for the data center, and so that's why I didn't put it on paper. Because once I put it on paper, it's committed that that's what we have. But we will not need, right now, we would be looking at probably asking $1 to $2 million for an upgrade of the data center that we've paused until we do this, because we can pull that back down and don't need as much. So that's where the offset comes.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
There are no further questions or comments.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item is Zen City. Board members, this falls below the threshold, the $250,000 over the next 2 years. However, just as a reminder, so I will be authorizing it from my office. As a reminder, the board had conversation with me a little over a year and a half ago about frustrations with surveys, the number of responses we got, the quality of surveys, your inability to ask questions. So we started to go out. We met with a total of 4 companies, Thought Exchange, Zen City, others, that are out there in this current space who basically survey your communities. What stood out about Zen City was the fact that they use the AI technology, and that independent of us surveying. So the limitations that we have, as you know, as board members, is we can only send surveys to the email addresses that we currently have on file. What Zen City can do is they can actually expand that database to the entire county. Plus, utilizing their AI technology, they'll be able to have a listening ear to all social media platforms. So if the board is talking about school rezoning, and there are some big issues that will come before this board in the next few months that we're going to have some productive conversation around, and you in particular as board members have said, I want to hear from more people. I don't want to just hear from a handful of individuals that show up to a board meeting. How do I make sure that I'm getting to hear from everyone that's going to be impacted by any potential changes? So I'll use school rezoning. So the Attendance Boundary Committee has come up with multiple proposals for high school rezoning. That will be coming before the board here in the next 2 months. And then immediately after that, we'll bring elementary and middle school rezoning options to the board. The board will provide us feedback, say, yes, we like this, no, we don't. And then we'll hold community meetings. And then, of course, we'll do what we typically do. We put out a survey to ask for feedback. Parents, which models do you prefer? Or rank order them, whichever type of survey we choose to conduct. The problem is, nationally, the standard is if you get a 30% response rate of all available individuals, that's considered a high response rate. And that's disheartening because that is not representative, and there's no way for us to ensure that demographically that response rate is representative either. Capturing all of our communities, all socioeconomic levels, and other factors that should go into our decision-making. So again, the fact that Zen City allows us to not only target that in a traditional sense, but also will scour all social media platforms to capture comments and conversations that are happening outside of us pertaining to these same topics, and you'll be able to have that information. The ability to drill down into the information. So many of you, like myself, really enjoy drilling down into the data. So giving you a total number of people who say, yes, we love this idea, may not necessarily be what you're interested in versus, where did these respondents typically come from? We can heat map that and determine, did 90% of the respondents all come from one community? Did we fail to communicate this adequately? Those types of things. You can break it out by demographic subgroups. You can break it out by race, by gender. You can break it out by socioeconomic status, those types of things. So it's important for you, as you've expressed to me, to have a tool that you felt you'd be able to utilize to make informed decisions. And again, not rely on 4 or 5 emails you may get or a handful of speakers that come to a board meeting. So as I shared, we went out and did a lot of research. I did ask one of your colleagues, Ms. Miller, to sit in on those interviews because she was one of the voices at the table saying, I really like to have this tool. And the benefit of it too is that you as a board member can survey on certain topics too with assistance from the company. So you won't be able to generate your own survey, but you'll be able to tell us, this is what I'd like to ask people. And then they and their professionals will craft you professionally written survey questions, because survey questions, there's a whole art and science to it. And quite frankly, you can structure a survey to absolutely provide the response that you're looking for or that you want to justify versus getting a really accurate depiction of how people think and feel. So again, I wanted to bring it back to you. I was pleased that, again, I'll be authorizing this under my budgetary threshold, but as I've shared with you before, I don't think there's something that I've done that with that I've not brought before the board publicly. Many of you I know have had opportunities to have conversations and see demos and things of that nature, so I'm open to address any questions or concerns or comments that you may have. And I see Ms. Wyatt.
Thank you. I know you often tell me to get off Facebook just because I send you things that I see on Facebook. Will Zen City have the ability to see those things and report them directly to you or whoever the contact is as far as, for example, the one I sent you last night, there was a parent complaining where their student was dropped off from a bus. Will those all go to one place where they can be triaged of what department it belongs to, or how does that work?
So we could work with them to establish protocol and parameters. I just connected Ms. Pasco with the vendor so that we could begin to refine. So previously in the Power slide deck I'd provided you saw the timeline for implementation. So we're now making that next step. But we would be able to define parameters. So rather than looking specifically for feedback on rezoning, we could say concerns about transportation with Polk County Public Schools. We could label those and it would capture that and give us that feedback ongoing. So we would just have the obligation to go in and look at those. And then if new topics arise, then clearly we can target those. I don't know the specificity of how their AI works. They may tell me, no, Mr. Hyde, you don't have to do that. We can use 3 or 4 keywords like PCPS, angry, upset, frustrated, whatever it is, and it would capture those and kick those to us, and we'll be able to see what's out there and be able to respond a little bit more timely. So I can work with them to get a better answer for that, but yes, I believe the capacity is there for us to filter those topics as well.
Awesome. Well, I will continue to send you my Facebook screenshots until you tell me not to.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Last item on the superintendent's report for today, we're going into a closed session. And so at this time, we'd like to ask to clear the room. Oh, we're waiting for after G1. I apologize. Next item is staff district updates. Mr. Pitts. I missed that. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde. Just have one position to bring for you today. And I noticed that there's a mistake on the front page. But this position is a senior director under the Polk Transformation Office, which is under the Regional Assistant Superintendent, Nicole Bennett. I'm not sure what I did on this title page here, but the cost of that is included on your spreadsheet here, which is correct at $109,012, with benefits about $144,350. And this position would come back to you to approve at the next board meeting. That was a pretty quick presentation. Are there any questions that I can answer for you?
Dr. Allen.
Thank you, Superintendent. Glad you're here. Mr. Pitts, minor question. I was looking at the job descriptions on our website, and there is a job description with this title there. I think it was approved in 2023. Is that the same job description for this when you say new position?
It is not a new position with a new job title. It's just an additional position. So let me rephrase that. It's not a new position as with a new job description. Our senior directors in that sense are, for the different regionals, are the same. So it's just in the transformation office.
Okay.
So that's my nuance of words there, but it's a additional position onto our org chart, but not as a new job description.
So that's coming underneath the senior director
for the
transformation.
Regional assistant superintendent
Yeah.
of transformation. So this senior director, this will be a senior director report to the regional assistant under the transformation office. But it's not a job that requires a new job description.
Okay. Yeah, so I think my question was that, is this related to that job description? I guess I should probably pull the number up, but.
Yes, I believe that it is.
Okay.
I just don't have it in front of me because it's not a new job description.
No worries. Thank you. I was trying to correlate to what the job description entails, I guess, in my research around it. Thank you.
Ms. Fields?
My question was going to be similar to Dr. Allen's, and I guess I overlooked this when I was reviewing my agenda because I didn't see this attachment. So I wanted to know when were we given the information? Was it today or was it yesterday? And then secondly, when is this going to be effective?
It would come back before you at the board meeting in December. So that's when it would become effective. I did not give you this attachment until yesterday.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing anything.
You did not miss anything.
Okay. Thank you.
What happened, there was a glitch in the timeline. There was a miscommunication between Ms. Bennett, who currently is serving in the regional assistant superintendent's role, Mr. Pitts, and based off that miscommunication, we had initially proposed to bring this to you during the first phase of the position changes that you previously approved. Ms. Bennett had then communicated to Mr. Pitts that that change was not required, but that was an error. So now we're bringing it back to you. He has been serving in this role since that time. And so it's important for us to make sure that he's being compensated at that rate and for the work that he's actually performing for that office.
Can we make sure in the future that even if it's a position that's not new, but if it's someone that's going to be put in that position, that the job description still be attached, please?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
We'll do that from now on. Thank you. We'll do that.
Dr. Allen?
Just for clarity, make sure I got the right one. I did track down the job code. It's 10517. So if I could just maybe get the confirmation that that's the job code that I'm referencing. 10517. Perfect, thank you.
Send that to you in a few minutes, sir. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or comments, Mr. Pitts, thank you. Board members, there's donation report, and then I will turn it over to our chair for the board meeting agenda. Item D.
All right, very good. Thank you, Superintendent. Board members, if you need to take a moment to switch over to your agenda for tonight, we'll go through this. Great to have our guests with us at the table, and look forward to celebrating you this evening. So what I'll do is I'll just start to go through our agenda here, see if you have any questions. So basically, sections A through F, we'll start there. All right, and then going from A through F, we have G through J. We'll look at that section. Anything in that section? All right, and then moving beyond that, we have K through M. K through M. And then sections N through P. All right.
Thank you. On the facilities, there's quite a few things that I was wondering if someone can kind of expound on it. I want to make sure I'm understanding what is being demolished at Lake Alfred as well as Alta Vista. And then I wanted to know the timeline for Bartow Middle School's gym. I don't remember seeing that on there. It might have been there. And then I had a question about continuing contract for construction management at risk. It looked like there was a list of folks' names, but there was a sticky note that kind of blocked it on mine. And I just wanted to know if
Mr. Pitts is pulling in Mr. Fix and his team so they can answer those questions for you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, very good. What we could do is move on
Come back.
here
Yeah.
to this next section, N through P. N through P is where we're at right now. If anybody has anything else that they want to add to this. All right. Seeing none, I'll move to section Q through T. All right. Seeing nothing, we'll move to U. That's our action items for tonight. We have 3 items.
I had a question, please.
Yes, Ms. Fields, you're recognized.
I wanted to see if the superintendent can help me on this turnaround option plan for Crystal Lake Elementary. And it might be in here, and I just didn't get a chance to review it thoroughly. But it's my understanding, and it might not be relevant, is that some of the funding for the, for Crystal Lake is being put on hold from United Way. Are you familiar with that?
That's unrelated to the turnaround option plan.
But it supports that school, correct?
It supports the community aspect of the community wraparound service school that's authorized to University of Central Florida. So their private donor, who has for years continued to make considerable contributions to, so this DayNet program has decided that they'd like to invest those dollars elsewhere.
So the support that we are getting from them, is that going to impact the overall performance of the school, you think?
I don't believe so, because I don't think to date we have been able to demonstrate an ROI, but there are a lot of reasons for that. Again, a high student mobility rate at that school. They had a number of vacancies each year. That's not the case this year. Their principal is working very closely with Mr. Green, his team, in the transformation office and others on their, and they have their frequent instructional reviews, walkthroughs. We're tracking and monitoring the data very closely. So I don't know how much that's related to the wraparound school component, and I think more of the lift is on our burden and on our shoulders. And I won't be able to give the board an update on the 7D schools until mid-year PM2 closes, and that's slated to close immediately after winter break. So I'll be able to provide you with an update as to the progress we've seen at those sites. So I can better answer that question then, as far as their academic trajectory.
Well, hopefully, they're going to be open to the idea that if we see a tremendous improvement, that they would reconsider those resources coming back to the school.
So I won't disclose too much. There's an ongoing dialogue. I think they'd like to see their dollars spent elsewhere on that campus.
Okay.
In a different capacity. So again, that's an ongoing conversation.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Superintendent, I would add to that, just being in that board meeting, it was mentioned that, right, if the school did turn around, that the donor would potentially be back, right? Is that what, because that was communicated during that meeting. I just want to make sure there's clarity on that.
I think United Way communicated that, yes, sir. I believe Christina and her team communicated that.
All right. Thank you, Superintendent. All right, board members, anything else on those action items? And then from there, the superintendent, you'll have a report for us tonight?
Looking at Mr. Pitts, who's desperately trying to give me. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. And Mr. Murphy, you have something for us?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, very good. And anything, Ms. Matthews? All right, and board members, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Matthews, you would have received that annual P-card audit as well as the Loftman Oaks audit since our last meeting. So if you have any questions, concerns about those findings, you can reference that to the superintendent. And then we'll wrap up with our comments. So, yes, Mr. Murphy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Board Chair. Did anyone have any questions with regard to the recommended settlement agreement that will be presented? If you had any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah,
Pretty straightforward.
Indeed. Will we get a context? I mean, the statement's pretty clear. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a pending action in federal court that involved the firm of Scott M. Favora, public adjuster, arising out of damages that were incurred during Hurricane Irma in 2017. We have fully received all of our insurance settlement proceeds from those damages. This is simply a claim or a dispute regarding if we owe this public adjuster firm any money. We contend we do not. They contend we did. The monies was interpled or put into the federal court registry, and it was about $2.4 million, give or take, with interest that had accrued. We had a mediation October 25th that the superintendent and I and Mr. Pitts attended. The settlement agreement is attached. That's what we'll be asking you to approve. It essentially allows for 1/2 of the monies that are in the registry of the court to be dispersed to us, the school board, the other half to the public adjuster in settlement of all claims. And then the parties go their own way, they release each other, and we get about $1.7 million. So in my, it's recommended for approval. In my way of looking for it, it's $1.17 million. It's almost found money insofar as that it is a good result.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Still looking outward and not seeing anybody yet to address Ms. Fields' questions. And at this point, we'll continue moving forward. Any other questions on our board meeting tonight? All right, very good. So we'll just transition now back to our new business. Just a couple items there, just to keep you informed. I wanted to start with the reorganization review. This was brought forward, I believe Ms. Wyatt brought the topic forward, and we had a great discussion around it. So I wanted to make sure that everybody's voice was heard. So there is the election of officers document that's in there, and just wanted to bring that forward. As you know, I wanted to try to put this procedurally in place so it can be moved into our board manual. And then hearing from other board members. You can see there's proposed language that would put us in accordance to some of the ideas that were shared last time. So we'll start with that one. So Ms. Wyatt, you're recognized.
Thank you. I greatly appreciated you listening to our conversation last night or last time and seeing this going through the agenda. My one question on election of officers, because of our conversation earlier today about potential policy, is should we leave out the word physically in that elections of officers shall be made by roll call majority vote of members physically present? I don't think it changes anything because right now, if you're not here, you're not present. But it prevents us from having to go back and adjust it if we do adopt policy that allows people to participate remotely. So that would be my only question, just looking at how we can avoid having to look at this again if we adopt new policy.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Wyatt. Any other comments, board members, on this? Mr. Sharpless, you're recognized.
I certainly mentioned last time the way we did it currently as well as the proposed way. I'm okay with either one. So I'm okay with doing the election where we nominate multiple people and we vote on it based on A, B, or C versus saying yes or no for each individual. So yeah, I'm good either way. So I would be okay with the proposed.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Sharpless. Anybody else want to contribute to this? And is this something that we're wanting to implement for this evening's meeting? I did share it with Mr. Murphy as well, as he's prepared to speak to it. Superintendent's aware of this as well, so would love to hear anybody else's feedback. All right, Ms. Fields, you're recognized.
This appears to be the same process that we've used before, is it not?
It's the roll call vote.
Yeah, so the one that's listed current, that just sort of puts procedurally how we're currently doing it. And
Right.
you notice the proposed one has the slight nuance where you still go through the voice roll call vote, but you're voting on an individual name, one of the nominees. And if that nominee does not receive majority vote, then you basically take the top two candidates, and then you go through another roll call vote to
Okay.
determine if there's a majority on those top two. And if you need to go through that process again to get majority, then you would proceed.
So basically, what that allows for the proposed is that you would have maybe 2 or 3 board members potentially nominated before you actually vote. And then you would vote, board member A, board member B, let's just say board member C. Each board member would vote for then the board member they wish to be chair. As opposed to if you had a board member currently, a board member A is nominated, board members vote on board member A. If there are 4 votes for board member A, that board member A is now the chair. So that's the difference in the two protocols.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fields. Mr. Sharpless, you're recognized.
I say if we're going to change it, just change it for tonight. It's not going to cause any major procedural hiccups. It's the same thing we've been doing, except for the difference is just whether we vote A, B, or C, rather than yes or no. So I think if we're going to change it, and I'm okay with changing it. So,
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Sharpless. Ms. Wyatt, you're recognized.
I would concur with Mr. Sharpless. I think we go ahead and change it for moving forward. I don't know what we need to do that other than just giving you our opinion here.
All right. That's what I like to hear. I appreciate your feedback and the will of the board, and we will move that direction for tonight. The other document there, roles and responsibilities, this came out of our board manual, and it's just there, so we're all familiar with our roles and responsibilities. And then thirdly, you see the Polk County committees. So this is pretty much the list of all of our committee service at this point. So the way that we'll do this is just as tradition. If you have an interest, a high interest in serving in any particular committee, just email Yvette, and typically that will come in by first dibs. And I'll try to honor what your top recommendations are by the order that those emails are received from Ms. Yvette. So if you have any comments on that, and that will happen during our December meeting. And we'll have two roles that we'll have to vote on in that December meeting that evening as well. All right, Mr. Sharpless, you're recognized.
Would just make a healthy suggestion that it's not a first come, first serve, but that you just compile everyone's request and then determine, as a board chair, your leadership in determining, or whoever the board chair is at that time, determines that, so.
Indeed, very good, thank you. And if there's anything that's competing, I think would consider that, but then, yeah, definitely looking at how many committees individuals are currently serving in as well, so we're all balanced in that. So thank you for your comment, Mr. Sharpless.
Dr. Allen, if I may?
Yes.
On page 23 of the document, the manual for new school board members, at the bottom of page 23, item number 16, we may need to revisit that one because it apparently is in conflict with changes in statute. So we'll provide some recommended language. I'll have the attorneys look at that and provide a revision.
Very good.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Superintendent. Ms. Wyatt, you're recognized.
Thank you. That was touching on what I was going to comment on as well, and I think this probably goes into our next conversation, so if I need to hold my comments, let me know. But I think we need to look at that document as I don't know that any of us know where it came from. That's not the onboarding documents that we used when I came on board, but I also haven't ever seen them used with I don't know what was used when you all came out. I don't know where they came from or when they came out. I know we tried to talk about them at the end of our strategic plan this past year, but with only a half-day retreat, that has to be focused on strategic planning. So if that's something that we can create in a workshop, or if that needs to be an agenda item moving forward, I hope that we can truly workshop those, because I think that there's probably more that may end up in, depending on when it was, I don't know if it's something from the 90s that we found and we've brought back, or if it's something that's been developed in the past 10 years, but making sure that it's aligned with lots of current statutes that have come on since then.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Wyatt. Give context. That is that manual that's been brought to us multiple times. And it was a historical document that's been with us for a very long time as well. And we've been slowly working to update that. So we'll make sure that it's consistently before you, but just that's sort of the context where it's at.
Where does it live?
Yeah, so it's been in this new business for multiple times. We do have a shared document, and Ms. Yvette can maybe speak to that if we all have access to that shared document, so, and that folder, basically. And
I don't have access to any shared documents, so I don't.
yeah, Superintendent, would you want to maybe speak to that, because you're the one that established that and sent that out to us?
The board policy manual?
No, the actual the SharePoint.
I'd have to get with Ms. Pasco.
And you can reshare that with us, because basically there's a SharePoint page for us.
Yes, sir.
And then there's shared folders in there.
I'll see if I can find that.
All right. Ms. Fields, you're recognized.
The original document was done when Pat McManus was the executive assistant, so that's been a while back.
Yeah.
But there have been revisions throughout the time. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands, at least I hope it's understood, everybody is not as tech savvy as others. So I think we need to be mindful of that. And then I just want to make sure that we all understand that nothing is continuous as it relates to folks serving in the chair or the vice chair position. And I know that sometimes that has caused some bad feelings, but at the end of the day, we hopefully will do what we think is going to be in the best interest for our students and for our employees. I just want to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. All right, moving down to new business number 3. This is the general counsel information. As noted, you'll see that contract is on our agenda tonight. It's in the consent area, and we've seen that. We work sessioned on it. As an update, Doug Thomas has been working with Brian Warren and Carolyn as well, as it relates to scheduling those initial interviews. So if you notice in this timeline, so I'm trying to keep the timeline in front of us, which is approximately about a 12-week process. The very first step is the stakeholder interviews and listening sessions. So Mr. Thomas likes to spend approximately 30 minutes with each individual board member. So keep that in mind when Ms. Yvette reaches out to us to schedule a meeting. So the way that Mr. Thomas is going to do this is he'll send out a block of availability that he has in multiple days, over multiple days, multiple time frames. And if you could, please be responsive to Ms. Yvette to schedule those initial meetings. So his thoughts were that if we can get through the interviews in a timely manner, that he would be able to then develop that brochure that would come back to us in December. If that's not the case, then the launch, in a sense, would not happen until January. So just keeping you informed on that. So, Ms. Wyatt, you're recognized.
Do we have a rough timeline of when those are, because December's only 11 days away? So do we have when are they looking at, because essentially if we don't meet with them in the next 4 days, then it's Thanksgiving and then we come back and it's December. So do we know when we think that'll happen?
Just waiting on him to send those times. I mean, the phone call was as recent as 3 p.m. yesterday. So he's then going to send those time slots off to Ms. Yvette, and then she'll send them out our way.
And I would just request when this comes back and when we come back in December, if we can have dates or times already outlined for the rest of the timeline, just so that we can go ahead and, you know, we talked about this before, but getting 7 people available on the same day in the next couple months to do interviews is not easy. So if we could get those dates on our calendar before Christmas, that would be awesome.
All right, Ms. Yvette, if you want to take note of that, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wyatt. Ms. Fields, you're recognized.
Pretty much similar to what Ms. Wyatt said. I was under the impression that we would have a timeline. And do we have an idea as to what the ultimate date is that we'll be in a place to hopefully be able to interview and make a selection for the attorney? We have any idea on that?
I mean, in the contract, if you want to reference that, we can open up that item. It does have a very clear timeline on how each step will unfold, as far as how many weeks will be in between each step. But there's not like a hard deadline. I mean, it's 12 weeks from the start. But again, the work session item around the recruitment brochure seems to be the starting point of that 12-week period.
Hopefully, when we come back, we'll have a very detailed timeline from Mr. Thomas.
Indeed. And Mr. Warren is available if you want to speak to those details.
Thank you.
Yeah, do you have a moment, Mr. Warren?
My remarks are summarily similar to what you've offered as well, Dr. Allen, but to your point, Ms. Fields, in the document that was attached, it does outline each of the steps. And I know for a fact that the first thing we've got to do is get these informational pieces started so we can get the ball rolling. Once that happens, it will collapse into what would appear to be about a 12-week period from start to finish with respect to gathering the information of what our district is, what it looks like, developing the brochures, as you've seen for the other municipality which they work with, Once we get that on the ground, we'll be rolling. But I would say we're estimated about 12 weeks to get that done.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Warren. And I do see Mr. Fix here, if you want to come forward and maybe address the questions. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Fields, could you repeat for Mr. Fix some of the questions you had about the?
All of the items on the consent agenda, if you could just take a few minutes to go one by one and summarize exactly what we're doing. I know that 2 other items, we're demolishing quite a few buildings on campus, and then are we replacing those and all that wonderful stuff?
Yes, ma'am. So as part of the modernization of these 2 campuses, what we would, similar to Garner, where we were allowed to take down some of the buildings, but not all of them. So what the state, we have an architect will come in and do a Gestalti, and the Gestalti looks at the building and the condition of the building and the age of the building to determine, is it cheaper to just tear down and rebuild, or are these buildings in a condition and of an age that you should keep them? The state also helps dictate that, because the state's stance is, hey, some of these buildings were built with state funds, so they need to pass this test, so to speak. In both of these campuses, the vast majority of the buildings were such that it'll pass the test, the Gestalti, to go ahead and tear down. And then when we do, we'll be able to put a new building on the campus, similar to as we did at Garner, just as an example. And there's other examples in this county as well. And then the other buildings, it appears at this point, we'd have to keep. The only reason I say it appears is because as we get into the design, if we can make a real case that it's so costly to keep those buildings that we really need to see about taking them down, we could go another step further. But the first thing would be to see if we can do a design that we can keep, that we can do the campus and keep those buildings and make them a functional part of the campus as well. I don't know, does that answer your question?
It does answer my question, and my other question is, what is the timeline for Bartow Middle School's gymnasium? When is that item? If you don't have an answer, you can send it to me.
I would tell you, I spend so much of my time looking at the Gestalti part, I didn't even think to, I mean, I know that's an item on here, but I didn't think to.
Well, we can have it
research
by
that
this
one.
evening.
We can, and I
Yes, sir.
apologize for that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fields. All right, at this point, board member comments. If you have any feedback, thoughts, Ms. Wyatt, you're recognized.
Did we cover strategic plan? Did I
Oh, no, I did move by that.
have more to say? Okay.
So basically, I just want to keep those before us. And if you notice on pretty much everything that you're seeing now within board docs, if you notice, for example, I'm looking at strategic plan. Up top, you see the goals. And it's strategy 5.3, expand academic opportunities for all students to ensure that each child has opportunities to explore areas of interest that leads to. Typically, when we see agenda items, they are correlating to those strategic initiatives or goals that we have. So just want to make sure that we're aware of that. If you notice also, we're voting on our dates for work session and board meeting. And Superintendent Hyde has placed 3 board retreat dates in there as well, because we're going to be closing out our current strategic plan and renewing that. So, but in general, just wanted to keep those forward in front of us as we go through the reorg. Ms. Fields, you're recognized.
I meant to ask about the work session and the retreat calendar. And I guess my question is, I know that we had originally talked about having a retreat just before the election. And are we not going to do anything until September of 2025? I think that's what I saw as the first retreat date, but I could be wrong. I don't have it right in front of me.
Superintendent, you want to address that question?
I will be happy to bring and propose some additional dates for retreat between now and the end of the year. I think the board took action when we were talking about a variety of different topics and decided to eliminate that date, and because I think it got caught up in the discussion about the attorney and the timelines, and much to my disappointment. So I'll be happy to work with Yvette and Ms. Winchester to provide you with at least 2 dates for the remainder of this year, and I'll try and work around your schedules. I know most of you and your schedules and most of your availability. So,
I think it would need to be the first of the year. I think with the holidays coming.
oh, yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
No, first of the year count.
No, calendar year, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
At some point in time, especially with us having a new board member, I think for the benefit of
Correct.
Mr. Keys, it would be great if we could do that.
Yes, ma'am.
The other thing that I had is most of you know, I serve on the advocacy committee for the School Boards Association, and we did have our meeting by way of Zoom. And the legislative platform that was emailed to everyone is the one that went forward with the committee. And I would imagine when the school board conference comes up in a week or so, that'll be voted on, I would think. And then you already know about the Health Strategy Committee meeting, and we've been working and having a lot of meetings. And I think that at some point in time, we need to make sure that we formally thank the committee members for the hard work that they have done over the last six to 8 months, because it's been a heavy lift. And they've been very consistent and dedicated to the mission and to the process. And that's all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Mr. Sharpless, you're recognized.
So the first question I have might seem silly, but I was just wondering on the work session and board meeting proposed for 2025, 26, is there a reason why there's different colors for different rows, or is it just looks, it's like red, white, and blue, red, white, blue, yellow? Okay, so it's based on the times? Okay. 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 All right. Yes, thank you so much. But I'm not done yet. That was just the one question I have. I saw you were getting ready to push, like, mute my mic. And so I was wanting to bring it up. We got FSBA's platform. Thank you, Board Member Fields, for serving on the advocacy committee. I was wondering if and when we're going to have a Polk County Public Schools platform development. Is Ms. Dodge going to come down here? What is the plan for that?
So yes, that would be the plan, was to bring Ms. Dodge in during one of our workshop sessions and then go ahead and address those issues and identify your platform or the school district's platform for this legislative session. I can work with Ms. Dodge. It could either be in December or January.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Sharpless. Ms. Wyatt, you're recognized.
Thank you. I would encourage us to have that come in December and potentially do it back to back so that we can start using it because committee weeks will start right off the bat in January, that if we wait till our board meeting in January, we're going to be way behind the ball. As far as my updates, so I got to go to the Excel in Ed National Summit on Education last week. I was texting Superintendent Hyde my stream of consciousness through the entire conference, and he at one point texted me that he was no longer receiving my text messages. So it was that good. But I do have, I'm going to pass out, there were a couple different sessions that I was really impressed by. So one was with the Indiana DOE Commissioner of Education. The other was, and with Jacob Oliva, who's now in Arkansas, but talking about graduation pathways, which Indiana recently adopted theirs last year, so it will, it went into effect with the class of 2023. But it was really interesting that they're looking ahead in the workforce career technical education. So this is the one pager on it, but essentially it has the credit requirement. It has the, so the second component is learned and demonstrated skills, which is either a service-based experience, project-based, or a work-based. And then the third was their competencies. Which we currently have that you can use your SAT or ACT essentially as a concordance score. But they also included ASVAB, CTE concentration, an apprenticeship. And one of the things that their Secretary of Education said that was really powerful was, I really don't care what what the ACT score is of my plumber, which how many of you have ever asked your plumber what their ACT score is? So it was really interesting just to hear them talk and the successes that they've had. And most interesting seemed to be that there were several of our Florida legislators there that were having lots of conversations in Indiana. So it's something that I hope that we can look to. I know we've talked a lot in the past about how we build career technical education into our graduation requirements and make sure that we're advocating that all students that we're providing them with a diploma that means something. So this is definitely something I think that we should keep our eyes on. The other, and I will send out the link, I talked to Superintendent Hyde about it earlier, but Indiana also implemented a new job board last year, which I think is something that we could look at for Polk County specifically, but the way that they described it is it's supply and demand. So how often does a teacher go onto our job board and say, I want to teach second grade? There's 6 schools that have second grade openings. Where the heck is Winston Elementary? Do you even know where all of these schools are in Polk County? That theirs actually has, as from the supply side, so from the teacher side, they type in, this is where my home address is. I'd be interested in working within a 5-mile radius, a 10-mile radius of my house. These are all of the certifications I have. These are the grade levels I'd be interested in teaching. And from there, it will populate every job we have that meet those specifications. But really making sure that they're getting teachers, and it is open, they've expanded it now to all job categories, but making sure that they're getting people where they best fit, and making sure that they know where those opportunities are, as opposed to just hoping they find a school that is near their house looking at the grade level or what they're looking to teach. So it was really, really interesting and some things that we can keep our eye on in Polk. And I'll send that email out with the links for those as well.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Wyatt. Ms. Fields, you're recognized.
Yes, out of fairness to Ms. Dodge, we've had conversation about our legislative platform, and I believe that she's been working with Superintendent Hyde and some of the staff, so I don't think it's going to be anything that we cannot get accomplished before the end of the year.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Fields. All right, so we're going to pop now back up to that work session item, which is a closed session at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and close this meeting out and adjourn.